Watchery here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a frosty and foggy start for some of us, but it is going to be turning increasingly wet and windy thanks to this area of low pressure out in the Atlantic and its associated with fronts that are pushing their way in from the southwest, already bringing some heavy areas of rain, spreading into parts of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Some of the fog across northeast England into Scotland could linger into the first part of this afternoon, but once it does clear, we will see some sunny spells developing here. Temperatures generally in the realms of 7 to 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling quite cold where the fog does linger and underneath the most persistent cloud and rain. For this evening, we'll watch this band of rain push its way northwards, eventually reaching areas of Scotland, but we've got another area of rain pushing in from the southwest. This again turning things very wet across England and Wales into Northern Ireland later on, and with some very strong winds pushing in across this as well. And amongst all the cloud and rain, it's going to be a milder night for most of us, but still across parts of Scotland getting down into mid or low single figures. The detail of this rain for Monday is still a bit uncertain, so it is worth staying up to date with the forecast, but it will be quite a widely unsettled morning with that area of heavy rain moving in. Some sunshine and showers feeding in for areas of England and Wales later on in the afternoon, but a swathe of gales pushing through here, so still very unsettled. Showers and quite breezy for northern areas of Scotland as well. Temperatures on the chart between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. We hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part of the week as well, with more sunshine and showers. Bye-bye.
I don't know, it's a lovely sort of nice, foggy, misty start.
Yeah.
It'd been awful to drive down the M1, let me tell you.
Why? What, just
because of
mist?
oh, yeah, it's terrible.
Driving back, you have the sun in your eyes all the time as well. Yeah, but it was lovely and sunny, though, yesterday. Let's hope it is today.
It was, it's sort of crisp.
Crisp
Autumn. Oh, we'll see if it lasts.
No, it's winter, I think, not autumn.
Do you think? I suppose we are.
Winter.
Are we?
I think we're in winter now.
Are we technically? I
think so.
don't know. That doesn't know what you think. Up next on the programme, has the boss of Man United managed to avoid the firing line after their win yesterday? We'll find out from Aidan McGee.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It is 6:22. I just think we need to be a little bit careful with this whole protest stuff yesterday. Stephen's been in touch. Hi, Stephen. He said, so the Met Police said that people have a right to protest, but that appears not to be the case yesterday. Some people can and some people can't. But I don't think that's true.
No, nor do I.
Because...
the people who were making trouble weren't protesting at all, were they?
Well, even if they were... all these arrests and all the rest of it is because they were trying to barge through barriers that had been set up by the police around the cenotaph, and they were throwing things at police. Now, if the pro-Palestinian rioters, protesters.
Yes,
No, I've got to be careful. If they had tried to get through barricades and were throwing stuff at the police, then they would have been arrested. So it's not about not allowing them to protest, it's dealing with what happened on the scene. So we've got to be careful around all of that. They could have... Those people who were the counter-protesters, if you like, could have gone and done it peacefully.
Well, Alan says, stop calling them far-right. They're just showing the feelings of the majority of normal people who are fed up with Hamas supporters taking over our cities.
Language is important.
Very.
Because I don't think Hamas
and then there's
supporters
the
are
question
taking over our cities.
whether you think what happened yesterday with the sort of heightened tensions and people getting angry almost when they didn't need to, do you blame Suella Braverman for it? Would that anger have been so demonstrable if she hadn't said what she'd said? I don't suppose we'll ever know, but I know that a lot of people do feel very strongly that her words might have caused some of the trouble we saw yesterday.
I mean, the pro-Palestine rally was mainly peaceful, and the police are investigating, trying to identify people seen in there who were holding up pro-Hamas slogans, and that does need to be dealt with. Of course it does. But it's not... This whole thing is not black and white, and I think we've got to be very careful about trying to paint it as being black and white, because it isn't. So there you go. Helen's been in touch, says we just won our country back. So there you go. All right, shall we have a look at the sport with Aidan?
Yeah, because that's not controversial at all.
No. Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, Manchester United did win yesterday.
They did. It's funny, isn't it? Some managers are just a little bit fortunate. I know we've been criticising Erik ten Hag mercilessly over the last few weeks, but sometimes the lucky managers seem to just get a result just when they need it. Now, we've been criticising him, as you say, regularly over the last few weeks, but just consider this, what a win can do. 4 wins out of 5 Premier League games now. They've lost a couple of games in the cup competitions, but in the Premier League, not too bad. They're 3 points off the top 4. They've played a game more than most of the other teams around them, but going into an international break, that's not a bad position to be in. 2 consecutive clean sheets. They hadn't done that since May. So statistics can be turned on their head. They can be turned sideways.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different way of talking about it from yesterday.
I know, and it's a big week ahead of him.
You're saying his job was hanging in the balance?
Well, yeah, look, he would be the first to say that every day is heavily pressurised, highly pressurised when you're the Manchester United manager. They are the biggest club in the world, only in my opinion, because I've been around the world with them and I've seen them in a different light to other clubs, including some of the really big hitters in Spain and elsewhere, and Germany, etc. But suddenly it looks a little bit different for United. Big week ahead for them as well, and they've got Bobby Charlton's funeral tomorrow. And then later in the week we should see some movements on the takeover with Jim Ratcliffe taking over a quarter of the club, as we mentioned yesterday. So, as I say, going into the international break, there'll be a bit of a switch of focus from the Premier League onto the internationals. They'll work on getting a few players back, although, having said that, a lot of them will be going on international duty with their clubs, and so there's a risk of getting injuries there as well. But, as I say, it's amazing what a win can do.
Gosh.
What about this new independent football regulator that was announced in the King's speech on Tuesday? Not going down well with, of all people, Gareth Southgate.
He's a bit off message, actually, Stephen, because the FA are in favour of this. Well, they say they are anyway. The Premier League have always been historically against it. In fact, they're petrified against it. If we think back to February when they launched all those charges against Manchester City, if you're cynical, you might say, well, they were doing it to show the football regulator or anybody who was involved in initiating this idea that they could keep their own house in order.
What is the idea then? What would a football regulator do?
They have about 5 different tenets to what they want to achieve, and it mainly centres around making the clubs financially sustainable. You would argue that financial fair play is already meant to do that, but it probably isn't streamlined enough to save the clubs outside of the Premier League, or even lower than that, even in League One and League Two. It doesn't really apply to them. And we see basket case owners sometimes taking over clubs. They want to put an end to that. They want to make the owner and directors test a little bit more stringent to stop. And I would imagine they probably want to stop nation states taking over football clubs. I think that would be in their sights long term. They want to stop Saudi buying Newcastle United, because that muddies the waters completely. In fact, it creates what Arsene Wenger told me about 15 years ago was financial doping. He basically said that when a nation comes in and buy a club, even a multi-billionaire can't compete with the wealth of an individual nation. Imagine if Britain just bought an NFL franchise in America, probably be the most successful in the world, because they just load billions and billions against it.
Why is Gareth Southgate sort of saying that it's going to be contentious?
Well, in his words, and he believes that he doesn't know what a regulator is going to be comprised of, who's going to be in it, where's the expertise coming from. He believes that football is finding, in his words, simple solutions to very complex problems. I had this conversation with Michael Portillo about 6 months ago. We were talking about the football regulator on his show here on GB News, and while Michael wouldn't claim to be a football expert, his first question to me was, what possible example of a regulator in this country would football be looking at as an example of how to do it properly? Yeah. And he listed off all these regulators. He said, well, yeah, they're all pretty useless. You look at the energy regulator. We've got some of the highest energy prices in Europe. You look at the rail regulator. They're always on strike. They're always again the train prices are some of the highest in the world. So it's not really doing its job. Can football hope to achieve the same? I'm not sure that it can. I don't know who's going to be made up by. I don't know what kind of powers it's going to have, because there's going to be pushback from clubs as well, and it's going to create almost like a back and forth through the clubs, and I think that it will encourage good owners to leave the game if they find that the game's been over-regulated. Same as you do with any other industry. A lot of people leave those industries when they find they're being over-regulated. Yeah. I think it's a kind of barrier to good capitalism. Yeah.
Let's have another spin on the dime, which didn't go our way yesterday when it comes to the tennis.
He did all right, Jack Draper. You know, don't forget.
He didn't win.
He didn't win. I know. You're a tough taskmaster, Steve. He's probably glad you're not his coach. Yeah. But no, he's ranked 85 in the world, Jack Draper. He's had serious injury problems this year with his shoulder. He's had a really good comeback in the last few weeks. He was up against Adrian Mannarino, the Italian, at the Sofia Open in Bulgaria. And Mannarino is 25th in the world, vastly experienced. He had the best season of his career, 35 years old. But it went to 3 sets. Jack Draper won the second set, 6-2, I think it was. So signs of life there. He produced some brilliant shots. I looked at some of the highlights this morning, and I think he will come again. There's no doubt about that.
He's only 21, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, and the Australian Open is in January. We've got the French Open in April. By next summer, he could have made some serious inroads.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed.
Indeed.
21, baby.
Not so in tennis, but yeah.
Well, it's terrifying. Aidan, thank you very much indeed. It is 6:30. If you've just joined us, let's just remind you of the top stories this morning.
Well, the King, the Prime Minister and dignitaries from around the country and the Commonwealth will lay wreaths at the Cenotaph in London today, where a major policing operation remains in place after there were arrests and disturbances yesterday.
Well, as we remember those who gave their lives for their country, here on GB News, we've also been remembering those who served and survived. We take a look back at their thoughts and struggles throughout the programme.
The conflict in the Middle East dominates our domestic politics, while the spotlight moves from the war in Ukraine. We have a former KGB spy in the studio to help us look at the big picture and what it means for Britain. He'll be back with us again just after 8.
Doctors Without Borders says hospitals throughout the Gaza Strip have been under relentless bombardment for 24 hours, with local authorities saying more than 11,000 people have now died in Israel's military operation. Local authorities, we should point out, are Hamas-based.
And the race to the White House heats up because Donald Trump has been telling a rally overnight that if elected again, he would expel those horrible, horrible warmongers from government. We'll have expert analysis on that live from the States just after 7.
Coming up for you, hundreds of thousands of protesters taking to the streets of London yesterday. We'll discuss that march and much more in Headline Makers. That's next.
Fed up of being patronised and bored to death by other afternoon news shows? Me too. So I thought, if you want a job done properly, do it yourself. News as it breaks on TV, radio and online. All the big debates and the best guests on the topics that you actually care about. Whether you're having discussions with your mates down the pub, in your van to and from work, or around the dinner table with your family, that's the kind of stuff that this show is all about. Join me, Patrick Christie, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, it's 6:34. Time to go through some of the headlines this morning with writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and the journalist and author, or writer and journalist, Ella Whelan. I'll just describe it in different ways. Good to see you both this morning. Before we chat, let's have a look at what the newspapers are covering for you.
Well, the Sunday Times says hate, intolerance and arrests as thugs hijack Armistice Day.
Mail on Sunday has Michael Gove jostled and abused by pro-Palestine hate mob.
The Sunday Mirror goes with right-wing mob in cop clash. Actually, no, that one we're showing there says Saka now.
And the Observer says calls grow for Israel to hold fire in Gaza as marchers throng London. Throng?
Throng. I thought throng was a thing rather than a verb.
I don't know.
Can you throng? I think maybe you can throng. I don't know.
Yeah, very odd.
It's a verb.
Anyway, let's go through some of those with Emma and Ella. Emma, let's start with you, should we? Looking at some of the protests. Let's have a quick listen in to, or a quick look at what was happening on the march
yesterday.
It's not a hate march. I've never seen anything related to what's been reported on hate. Previously, I've marched with Jewish people from all faiths and agnostics and atheists, and so yeah, here again, because I think Armistice Day is the perfect day to march. If nothing else, gosh, how many people actually don't respect the 11 o'clock silence, but want to preach about this being a hate march and that we shouldn't march for peace. So that's why I'm here.
Suella Braverman's words just made me want to come out more, because I think she's very hypocritical. Armistice Day is supposed to be about the end of the war, and this is exactly what people are here for. We want to see an end to the war in Gaza.
I want them to do a ceasefire and then to put all the effort into negotiations. And it's not up to me. I'm not a Palestinian. I don't live there. I can't say, oh, it should be this, it should be a two-state, it should be a one-state. That's not up to me. What's up to me is to talk to my government, to say whatever I can to my government to stop supporting Israel doing what they're doing to the people of Gaza.
Difficult to call them hate marchers, isn't it?
Of course it is. And we know that the vast majority of marchers were peaceful yesterday. And I respect their cause as well. But there is no doubt in my mind that the day and the weekend has been hijacked, you know, by this issue. The fact is, this weekend should have been a moment of calm and reflection and peaceful remembrance, and thanks as well to people like my father and I'm sure grandfathers and many, many, many people's families who fought in the war, and many of whom gave their lives. It's been hijacked. It's been ruined.
Ella?
I think that there is a fair point to... I think I support the right to protest, I'm sure most people do. And I think there is a fair point to saying that on a day of which, as that young woman described, is meant to be about the ending of conflict, the ending of a specific war, but, you know, that in the 21st century you might be able to relate that to what's going on in Israel-Gaza. I'm not so sensitive about the timing of the march. And my problem is that is more the content of the discussion about Israel-Palestine, which is the thing that annoys is not a really appropriate word. But the thing that gets me is the constant discussion about ceasefire. when in actual fact I think we should be more honest and say that what is being requested is just for Israel to stop, because Hamas isn't interested in a ceasefire at all. And so using the language of ceasefire makes it sound like there are two kind of forces that are just knocking heads and just need a little bit of Western intervention to help them sort it out. There's such an oversimplification of what's happening, and I can understand why a lot of British Jews are trying to get to grips with why so many people think that that Israel should just give up and allow Hamas to regroup and continue to kill Jews. So I have always been critical of Israel. I think lots of people on that march have quite an old-fashioned position around Palestinian self-determination, which I think is still relevant and is still important to talk about. What I wish there was on marches like that is more posters condemning Hamas. Just a clearer line on Hamas.
There does seem to be a lot of skipping over or conveniently forgetting. And of course, the history, it goes back, and it's such a complicated situation. But firstly, as you say, Hamas is in no mood. They're not even close to sitting down and negotiating.
They would just do October the 7th all over again,
those
wouldn't they?
hostages, exactly. And a lot of people on those marches are just sort of skipping over what happened 4.5 weeks ago. Sorry, 5 weeks ago. So, I mean, that is problematic. And then you have the extremists, you have the pockets of individuals who kick off. And I think we all knew that when dark fell and when hundreds of thousands of people, I mean, some pro-Palestinian organisers are claiming that up to 800,000 people were in central London yesterday. I think it's more like 300,000.
That's what the police are saying.
But the idea that you can ask those people who are inflamed anyway, emotionally worked up, and many troublemakers who've been drinking all day or whatever, you can ask them to disperse peacefully. It was always going to be a very, very tense situation.
Yeah, but enough to... I mean, you were saying earlier on, it hijacked. But was that enough to ban it?
Yes, I do. Well, OK, banning is such a strong word, isn't it?
Because I think it's the legal threshold, isn't it?
I know, and that threshold of extreme violence, according to Sir Mark Rowley, was not met, and that's the law. But I do think that it would have been a gracious and very beautiful gesture to say, this weekend is about the veterans. This weekend is about that commemoration.
Yeah, I would agree.
I wouldn't agree at all. I think it would have been appalling if the march had been banned in the name of being gracious, because the precedent that sets for having some kind of emotional threshold for the right to protest is not good. But there was this interesting...
It's a sacred weekend.
It's a sacred weekend for some. And, you know, the fact is we live in a free society in which there is, you know, respect is very important, but, you know, the right to protest, I think, is probably more important.
In fact, I think we've got a bit of film of a protest that actually happened in Tel Aviv yesterday. Let's have a look at that.
We are here to protest against the indiscriminate killing of civilians that we are seeing in the past weeks by Hamas and by the F in the Gaza Strip. We are calling for a ceasefire now and release of the hostages and going towards a solution to this never-ending bloodshed and continued killing.
We are calling to end the deadliest war against Gaza. We condemn the killing of civilians, especially children, no matter if they're Israeli, if they're Palestinians. We want everyone that live inside the border and outside of it, whether it's within Israel, the Gaza Strip, or the West Bank, to live in peace and equality.
Well, that's a sign I agree with. War has no winners.
Yeah, well,
absolutely.
It was actually interesting what happened in Tel Aviv because, you know, there is a large section of particularly young Israelis on the left who have, who don't agree with their government, who don't want to, who are opposed to Israel's movements in Gaza. But there was two sorts of protests. There was that which happened, which was a kind of young lefty one, and then there was also a second protest where family members of some of the hostages and relatives came out and also criticised the Israeli government, and their line was, you just should be focused on bringing them home. Instead, you're talking about flattening Gaza. We're not interested in flattening Gaza. We're interested in bringing them home. So actually, there's mounting pressure and criticism even within Israel, because there is this sort of there's this double thing going on, which is obviously a focus on trying to return the hostages, but the wider sort of consequences of what's going on within that region and the Israeli government's, long-standing interests in, its relationships with Gaza and the West Bank and all the rest of it also comes into it.
You just can't figure out how this is going to end, can you?
Well, there isn't a clear way in which it's going to end. I mean, Netanyahu has been... the Israeli government's been quite clear that it has an interest in who takes over. With Gaza, it said they will not allow the PA. It will not allow... it's not just a kind of clear Gaza and see what happens. A lot of people are saying there is no exit strategy, there is no plan.
No.
But there kind of can't be. Who could have expected Hamas to do what it did?
But what annoys me with this, and it forgive me, but it does annoy me, is you have an awful lot of people with black and white views on this, which you cannot
it's not a
have
solution.
on this.
You can't. It's so complicated. And I think I was just listening to those young guys in Tel Aviv, and I think basically much of the younger generation and many of us are at heart pacifists, and that's not a solution. That's not going to get us anywhere.
No,
we just don't
peace doesn't create peace, does it?
I know, and not when you're dealing with people like Hamas or a very, very angry, understandably, Israeli Prime Minister and cabinet. And basically, we just don't want any more innocent civilians on either side to be killed. And it's going to happen, and that is what is happening in Gaza at the moment, and that is what is what happened on October the 7th.
Yeah, I mean, that's the...
And we're not military experts either.
No, but that's the harsh reality, isn't it? Call for a ceasefire, have an actual ceasefire, and that will almost inevitably result in more Israeli civilians being massacred at some point down the line.
Yeah, or release the hostages and then have a ceasefire. But Hamas are not playing ball on that either.
I just think it's interesting, that clip that we showed of the woman towards the end of the Vox Pops who was saying that I'm not Palestinian, I can't say anything about what happens in that region, but I can say something to my own government. I think that we, outside of Israel and Palestine, we do have a responsibility to think about what happens with groups like Hamas. Growing Islamist threat is a problem in our own country, it's a problem in France, a problem in lots of Western European countries. Hamas is part of, that whole ideology of a kind of death cult, particularly anti-Semitic, particularly anti-Western civilization, does things like goes and bombs kids in Manchester or beheads babies in kibbutzes. We should have an interest in doing something about that.
Yeah, we need to face up to it.
And I think that a lot of the thing that makes me not join those marches, there's a lot of things, but primarily because there just seems to be this unwillingness to deal with the fact that Hamas and Islamism is a serious threat that isn't just the business of Israelis, but is for all of us to think about.
Yeah, as was it you, Emma, who said, if that pro-Palestine march had people carrying anti-Hamas slogans, I'd be a lot more sympathetic to it.
And we can't ignore the fact that there is growing anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish hatred, anti-Jewish sentiment, let's call it what it is, in this country, and that many, many Jews are feeling threatened and frightened and not coming into central London and not going about their business and not sending their children to school in their Jewish uniforms and all of that at the moment.
Yeah. OK, we're going to come back to you in just a second. It is 6:45. If you have just joined us, let's just remind you of the top stories so far this morning.
Well, the King, the Prime Minister and dignitaries from around the country and the Commonwealth will lay wreaths at the Cenotaph in London today, where a major policing operation is still in place after those arrests and disturbances yesterday.
Well, as we remember those who gave their lives to their country, here on GB News we've also been remembering those who served and survived, looking back at their thoughts and struggles throughout the programme.
The conflict in the Middle East dominates our domestic politics as well, while the spotlight moves from the war in Ukraine. We have a former KGB spy in the studio to help us look at the big picture, why we're all still at war. That's just after 8.
Doctors Without Borders says hospitals throughout Gaza have been under relentless bombardment in the last 24 hours. 11,000 people now believed to have been killed in the Strip. That's according to the Hamas-run Health Ministry.
And the race to the White House heats up, with Donald Trump telling a rally last night that if elected again, he would expel those, quotes, horrible, horrible warmongers from government. We'll have expert analysis live from the States in just a few moments.
OK, going through the headlines with Emma and Ella. Emma, let's have a look at these bronze sculptures of Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth unveiled last night.
God, it's so confusing now. King this and Prince that, and everyone's everything's moving around. So this was King Charles and Queen Camilla. They were unveiling statues of the late Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, his parents, obviously, at the Royal Albert Hall, and they're very lovely, actually. These bronze sculptures. They fill a couple of empty plinths at the Royal Albert Hall, which have been empty since 1871, and they're rather charming. And King Charles, who's going to be 75 on Tuesday, I think it's Tuesday, seemed genuinely moved and really quite emotional.
Well, you
Obviously,
would, wouldn't you? I mean, they're his parents, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, he's had to unveil how many millions of statues over the years.
He did look very, very moved.
He did seem very moved, and they're rather lovely statues, I think.
Yeah.
In a fitting place as well.
Yeah, I think that's really nice, actually.
And those empty plinths.
I love the Royal Albert Hall. It's fab. It's a fab place, isn't it?
It's wonderful.
It's brilliant.
I used to do concerts there with Blue Peter, filled with kids.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
we all got Blue
fantastic.
Peter badges, and I mean, obviously, I'm, whatever. Put aside your feelings about the royal family, they're wonderful statues, and at a time when there are some very not wonderful statues, particularly in relation to public art, it's quite nice to see something traditional and well executed.
I haven't seen it close up, but it's a young queen, isn't it?
Yeah, and very, very characteristic Prince Philip. He's sort of striding forward in a very Prince Philip way. You're going to come on, let's get on with this. I think they're beautiful. And you're right, there are some statues where everybody says, oh, and kind of doesn't quite know what to say. For example, in Parliament Square, there are some slightly odd public statues, but I think these show the king, the late Queen and Prince Philip at their sort of young, beautiful best.
Yeah, because it was the Festival of Remembrance last night, wasn't it? Which is a wonderful event.
I didn't see it because I didn't stay up late enough to watch it, but that's usually where they let off all the poppies and all the poppies come floating down. Absolutely wonderful.
It's a lovely event.
It is.
Ella, we've got this video. A video of an albino puma. There can't be very many of those around.
Well, life goes on, and in Thomas Belt Zoo in Nicaragua and Jogalpa, this very rare thing happened, which is there's only 4 worldwide, and a baby albino puma born.
Oh,
very cute. And really quite remarkable. Needs a lot of care because of its colouring, it's vulnerable to sunlight, and it won't be allowed to be shown to the public for 3 months, and they have to be very careful with it. But something that's very, very rare. And I was looking at facts about pumas. Pumas have the largest geographic range of any land mammal in the Western Hemisphere. So
how big is it?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
I think they're the fastest.
Aren't they the fastest?
Yes,
Yeah,
I've always heard that pumas are the fastest on the planet.
I thought that was leopards and things.
Oh, I don't know. I'm going to have to check now. But I mean, if you're listening on the radio, you're missing it. It's just, it just looks like a lovely white pussycat.
It looks really sweet. I'm not an animal person at all, and I'd quite like that.
Yeah.
I think that's very sweet. It's just over 6 kilos.
6 years. Oh, bless.
So it's sort of, a couple of bags of sugar.
When it grows up, it'll be a bit more scary, I suspect.
It will be. I just hope it doesn't. Will it integrate properly? Even
they have to do certain things like, obviously the animal kingdom is the brutal place. They have to keep the dad away because they're known to kill their cubs, and they have to be very careful about human smells getting on the cub in case that the mother gets confused. But no, she's taken to it as any normal coloured cub, so
tell you what, if you Google
story.
puma, which I just have, it comes up the trainers, the people who are trainers.
Of course.
So I'm still trying to find that for you, but
there you go. Large secretive cats.
And where is Jogalpa?
It's Nicaragua.
Nicaragua.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Well, that's lovely to see, actually.
OK, they're large secretive cats, commonly known in some places as cougars and mountain lions.
I never knew cougars and pumas were the same thing.
And why are middle-aged women who have relationships with younger men called cougars? Where does that come from? Is that just because they're predatory?
Possibly.
Yeah, well, you've answered your own question there.
Yeah.
Just wondering.
Or, slinky, saucy.
Sauce, well, yeah.
Usually dressed in leopard print.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that could...
Well,
all right.
More silly
carried away.
stereotypes.
Can't find anything about the speed at which they run, so maybe we are thinking of something else, but there you go. Beautiful cat.
Talking of speed, Emma, in The Sun this morning, they're talking about the dangers of slow drivers.
Yeah, it's not just speeding drivers who cause accidents. Actually, slow and hesitant drivers and I think we all know this, actually, from being on the road, whether by bike or car. Slow drivers, people who slow down suddenly, people who are very hesitant and don't kind of, go at the green light and all of that, they can cause as much problems as speeding drivers. And apparently, according to The Sun, more than 1,400 people have been killed or injured over the past 10 years in crashes by drivers going too slowly. So, it's about speed awareness. I think also there's a lot of older people on the road who are very slow and very hesitant. And when you don't kind of maintain that, when you don't maintain a steady speed, that's really dangerous for other drivers, but also for...
But a few years ago, I spoke to the late, great Lionel Blair about slow drivers, and he was saying, he was coming on specifically to talk about the fact that we need to be more patient with older drivers. They've got a right to drive, and yes, they may drive more slowly, but we've got to be respectful of that.
Yeah, but it is hard when traffic is kind of going at a certain pace. And people are...
It's not so much the slowness, then. It's, as you said, it's the hesitancy.
Hesitancy and probably slower reactions and things like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But also, I think it's other drivers around them, people not being patient, because when you get white van drivers or anyone, cyclists like me, who are getting impatient and other people are getting frustrated, that's when crashes happen, isn't it, really?
Do you think maybe it's because there is a lot less... Driving is become a kind of generational thing. There's a lot less people my age and younger who drive.
Really?
Because, particularly in London, because one, it's too expensive, and two, why would you? But there's a lot of, never mind the older drivers, there's a lot of young people who are...
And they just hire a van at weekends to move house or something.
Me and my husband always laugh because he's from the countryside, I'm from London. I learned to drive in London, he learned to drive in Devon, and he could not make sense of London driving. He was like, why is everyone so rude and horrible? I said, no, they're not. They just have places to be. Come on,
they are. No, they are rude and horrible.
But it's actually a skill, learning how to be pushy and confident and not hesitant. And I think anyway, I'm not going to go on an LTN rant, but I think that we should, driving is a skill that young people should have. Whether or not they use it, I think a lot more focus should be on driving. And the ability to drive.
Totally disagree. I think that...
And cycling, if you like.
And cycling as well, using the roads, but using the roads responsibly. I think lots of young people just hire a car when they need it, when they're going away or they're moving house or something like that. And so you get people that simply haven't got the hours. With driving, it's about getting the hours under your belt, and then you get better at it. It's like anything else. But
is this a city-centric problem, if not a London-centric problem? Because I'm from the countryside, and everyone,
Oh, you have to.
Just about everyone at 17 gets driving lessons for their birthday.
Because you needed them.
Because you need them.
Yeah,
how else to get about?
Yeah.
So I'm all for driving. I love driving.
No, but that's an age thing as well, because the older you get, the more you hear people saying, I don't want to drive anymore. I hate night driving now. Absolutely hate it. And in the winter, when it's mostly dark, I hate driving in the
but even
in the dark and in the wet.
In the dark and the wet, it's exhausting. It's very tiring because you're looking at hundreds of glittering lights and traffic and car lights and everything. I know you shouldn't mention cycling on GB.
No, I know it won't go down well. Email in.
Shut up.
gbviews@gbnews.com. Look, Ella, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you a little bit later on. Let's get the check on the weather with Jonathan.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a frosty and foggy start for some of us, but it is going to be turning increasingly wet and windy thanks to this area of low pressure out in the Atlantic and its associated with fronts that are pushing their way in from the southwest, already bringing some heavy areas of rain, spreading into parts of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Some of the fog across northeast England into Scotland could linger into the first part of this afternoon, but once it does clear, we will see some sunny spells developing here. Temperatures generally in the realms of 7 to 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling quite cold where the fog does linger and underneath the most persistent cloud and rain. For this evening, we'll watch this band of rain push its way northwards, eventually reaching areas of Scotland, but we've got another area of rain pushing in from the southwest. This again turning things very wet across England and Wales into Northern Ireland later on, and with some very strong winds pushing in across this as well. And amongst all the cloud and rain, it's going to be a milder night for most of us, but still across parts of Scotland getting down into mid or low single figures. The detail of this rain for Monday is still a bit uncertain, so it is worth staying up to date with the forecast, but it will be quite a widely unsettled morning with that area of heavy rain moving in. Some sunshine and showers feeding in for areas of England and Wales later on in the afternoon, but a swathe of gales pushing through here, so still very unsettled. Showers and quite breezy for northern areas of Scotland as well. Temperatures on the chart between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. We hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part of the week as well, with more sunshine and showers. Bye-bye.
Sunshine and showers. Not very nice to drive in. Anyway, do stick with us because we've got lots more coming up. And of course, it's Remembrance Sunday today.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Very good morning. Very nearly 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 12th of November. Today.
Again on Remembrance Sunday follows that familiar solemn scene in Whitehall as around the cenotaph centres the time-honoured, unchanging ceremonial.
Lest we forget, it is Remembrance Sunday, and the King, the Prime Minister and dignitaries from around the country and the Commonwealth will lay wreaths at the cenotaph in London, where a major policing operation is still in place after those arrests and disturbances yesterday.
Well, as we remember those who gave their lives for their country, here on Breakfast we've also been remembering those who've served. We'll take a look back at their thoughts and struggles as the country prepares to thank them for their bravery and sacrifice.
As the race for the White House heats up, former President Donald Trump holds a rally in New Hampshire and calls for horrible warmongers in the US government to be expelled. We'll be live in the United States with the latest analysis.
As hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets of London to take part in yesterday's marches, the Met Police say they're actively looking for individuals who carried anti-Semitic placards. We'll have a look at this and much more in Headline Makers.
And then, of course, Jonathan will have your weather.
There are some lovely frosty and foggy scenes around this morning, but those will be quickly replaced by wetter and windier conditions. Join me for the full weather details later on.
Morning to you, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Ann Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
I know the John Lewis ad and everything is out.
Yeah.
Already, and all the
Christmas.
other ones. But are Christmas trees and things appearing too early? Christmas decks and all that. There's a Christmas tree in the reception.
Huge Christmas tree, and it looks lovely. I think it is time now.
Do you?
To get the Christmas decks out, yeah.
You do like it early, though, don't you?
Yeah, but what's the point of putting it up just for 1 or 2 weeks like people do? I mean, put your decorations up. Feel happy. We need to work at feeling happy at the moment.
We do. But if you get a real Christmas tree, like we do.
Oh, well...
You can't get it. I mean, like, the place doesn't open until... We always put ours up the last weekend of November, because that's when it opens.
Yes.
To buy it.
OK, but you can put your lights up. You like lights.
Oh, get the lights out.
Yeah.
And the little lasers, all that sort of... They do all of that.
Put lasers?
Oh, yeah, lasers on the front of the house and the back of the house.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
What does it say? This is where Stephen lives.
No, it does not. No. No, it's just sort of nice colours and little...
Well, you see, that's what I mean. I do think that, I mean, look, it's very dark, it's very wet, it's now very cold at the moment, and the news is so unhappy, generally, that I think we've got to work at something to smile about, something to put a smile on your face. I've got a party trick for you.
Oh, go on, then.
OK, so I learned it from my son yesterday, so, I mean, if you know it, forgive me. But, right, hold out your hand like that, palm facing down, OK? Now, I want you to have your palm facing up without moving your wrist.
Without moving my wrist?
So obviously you'd think it must be like that, but that would be moving your wrist. So how can you do it?
I don't know.
OK, shall I show you?
Yeah, go on.
Right, OK, hang on a minute. Right, so you've got to look at me and what I do now.
Yeah.
OK, so your palm facing down, you hold it to your chest.
Yeah.
Put it up.
Yeah.
Then down, right?
Yeah.
You moved your wrist. Start that once more. Right.
Up.
So no, across to your chest.
Yeah.
Right. Your palm still facing down, and then up.
Yeah.
And then
down.
Down. You'll notice now your wrist, your palm has moved. 90 degrees. But you haven't moved your wrist.
Yeah.
Then you do it again to your chest.
Yeah.
Up. Down.
Ah.
Isn't that clever? I can't figure out how it works. It's something to do with the rotator joint in your elbow. So your palm down, move it to your chest, up, then back down, right? And then you do it again, up, and suddenly your palm is facing up.
That's weird.
Isn't that weird? Yeah.
That's weird.
I know. I can't figure it out.
Oh, I like that one, though.
If there's an osteopath or somebody who understands bones watching at the moment, can you tell us why that works? Yeah. It must be something to do with the elbow, but I can't think what.
No, clever. Very clever.
There you are. If you've got a party trick, tell us about it. Because
something to do with Christmas.
Parties.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
There you go.
Show off.
Anyway, it's nice to have something to talk about that isn't grim at the moment.
Yeah, in fact, that's a nice thing to ask you for, because we're getting a lot of very forthright views coming in about the pro-Palestinian marches and things like that. But if you've got something, what puts a smile on your face at the moment? Love to hear from you.
Yeah.
gbviews@gbnews.com.
Mind you, it's not a surprise that a lot of people are getting worked up, because it's thought that about 300,000 pro-Palestinian protesters calling for a Gaza ceasefire marched in central London yesterday. It's thought to be the biggest rally since the Israel-Gaza war began.
And throughout this week, concerns were raised, of course, by politicians about the potential disruption at commemoration events, questioning whether those protests should be allowed to go ahead at all.
Well, people attended with children, and it was largely peaceful, although dozens of counter-protesters were arrested by the Metropolitan Police for a number of offences.
We also understand the police are attempting to identify people who attended the main protest seen with pro-Hamas slogans. Our national reporter Thea Chakumba has this report.
On the day to commemorate the end of World War I, hundreds of thousands of protesters marched in central London to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Some 2,000 officers were deployed across the capital, with officers drafted in from other forces in England to support the Metropolitan Police. Ahead of Armistice Day, there were concerns about potential disruption taking place at events across the capital. But the Met Police said their job is to police without fear or favour, balancing the rights of all. A 2-minute silence was held at 11 a.m. on Saturday morning across the UK, marking the moment when hostilities ceased in 1918. But as the moment of silence came to an end outside Whitehall in London, protesters chanted as wreaths were laid at the cenotaph. A few hundred yards from there, police clashed with far-right groups who attempted to enter an exclusion zone, and were also met with violence and abuse in the West End, in what was described by the police as unacceptable violence. As the day progressed, the Met confirmed that dozens of counter-protesters were arrested for a number of offences, including possession of offensive weapons, affray to prevent a breach of peace, and more. Away from the city, it was a day for veterans like John to take a moment to reflect.
I've seen quite a few armistice days now, and that depends on how you feel at the time. Different days you're more melancholy than others, and you can easily be upset. But today, I'm quite happy now. I've had my minute's silence, and I'm going to the Garden of Remembrance.
While protests drew hundreds of thousands of people into the capital, it didn't take the focus away from many who took time to remember those who sacrificed for their country. D.H. Comber, GB News.
Well, this Remembrance Sunday, it is important that we not only remember those who we lost, but also those who are still with us.
This weekend on GB News Breakfast, we have had the pleasure of speaking to veterans about their experiences and how they reflect on weekends like this.
The people, yes, some are named on our memorial at House Junior, Annie Focus, Lieutenant Trading, a chap whose name is either Farquhar or Farquharson. Their faces rather than names. The names go, I'm sorry. So one remembers names, one remembers faces, one remembers voices, even on a couple, and then put names on gravestones, bodies on the ground, in the water.
So as somebody who has served, you've been part of that life. What does today mean to you?
Well, it's a big question. I suppose the easy answer would be reflection, and I'm sure anybody would really say that. But really, what does that reflection mean? Yes, looking back over past conflicts, absolutely. One of the main reasons that I joined the army or chose to serve in the first place was because moving to the UK, I was just so absolutely blown away with the way that people sacrificed themselves and served and gave as much as themselves as possible, and often quite thanklessly, but they did it anyway. So really looking back over the past, yes, it's sort of paying respect to those people that sort of might have given all, or at least faced some really hard situations for us over the ages. But also, I think reflecting on the world as it is now, and also looking to the future as well. I think if we don't learn from the past, as it says, we're doomed to kind of make not necessarily the same mistakes, but we're doomed to kind of repeat ourselves. And I think it's just really important to just look forwards as well.
We focus on those who have lost their lives, and it's important that we do so around remembrance, but it is about those people who have come back and left with, even if it's only a small trauma, it's still something that affects them for the rest of their days.
We live in a veterans community. There's supposed to be 200 of us, but our trustees have kicked 100 out, which is a story for another day.
Yeah, different story, yeah.
But if you come back late at night, sometimes you hear people crying literally out in the night. And it's really, 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 really...
harrowing.
Really harrowing. And that's what people don't understand, because when you put these people away and you forget about them, they're still having their lives to live.
Yeah.
They've seen something or experienced something that you can't just magic it away.
We've met some really amazing people this week, we really have.
Yeah,
and there will be some amazing people marching past the cenotaph and war memorials all over the country, I think, today.
Yes, let's show them some respect.
Oh, absolutely.
Some dignity. I think that's what we're a little bit short of at the moment, so let's all do that. Anyway, let's look at some of the other stories heading into our newsroom at 11 minutes past 7.
The ever-colourful Donald Trump has filed a legal motion backing media requests for live television coverage of his federal trial over charges that he conspired to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. He's arguing that prosecutors want the trial held in darkness as part of what he claims is a politically motivated effort by President Joe Biden's administration.
Doctors Without Borders have said hospitals throughout the Gaza Strip have been under relentless bombardment for the last 24 hours, with local authorities saying more than 11,000 people have now died in Israel's military operation. Those local authorities, we should say, the Hamas-run health ministry. So, you know, take that as you will. The organisation has reiterated its calls to stop the attacks against hospitals and for an immediate ceasefire.
And the King and Queen have unveiled statues of the late Queen Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh as they arrived for the Royal British Legion Festival of Remembrance in the Royal Albert Hall. They're life-sized bronze artworks commemorating the former Queen and her husband's dedication to the concert hall, and they were installed as part of its 150th anniversary.
The only downside with that, because it was all done in the dark, is you can't really see the statues.
You can't see them. No, they're in silhouette, aren't they?
I want to see the detail on them.
Yeah, in daylight.
Anyway, hopefully we will too. We'll have to just have a wander down at some point.
We should.
If the weather holds out. Let's see what it's going to do for you today. Here's Jonathan.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a frosty and foggy start for some of us, but it is going to be turning increasingly wet and windy thanks to this area of low pressure out in the Atlantic and its associated fronts that are pushing their way in from the southwest, already bringing some heavy areas of rain, spreading into parts of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Some of the fog across northeast England into Scotland could linger into the first part of this afternoon, but once it does clear, we will see some sunny spells developing here. Temperatures generally in the realms of 7 to 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling quite cold where the fog does linger and underneath the most persistent cloud and rain. For this evening, we'll watch this band of rain push its way northwards, eventually reaching areas of Scotland, but we've got another area of rain pushing in from the southwest. This again turning things very wet across England and Wales into Northern Ireland later on, and with some very strong winds pushing in across this as well. And amongst all the cloud and rain, it's going to be a milder night for most of us, but still across parts of Scotland getting down into mid or low single figures. The detail of this rain for Monday is still a bit uncertain, so it is worth staying up to date with the forecast, but it will be quite a widely unsettled morning with that area of heavy rain moving in. Some sunshine and showers feeding in for areas of England and Wales later on in the afternoon, but a swathe of gales pushing through here, so still very unsettled. Showers and quite breezy for northern areas of Scotland as well. Temperatures on the chart between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. We hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part of the week as well, with more sunshine and showers. Bye-bye.
Fascinating, that news about President Trump wanting to have his court cases televised.
Yes.
I mean, that will. I mean, a lot of people would actually like to see it, but it would just make him an even bigger star, won't it?
Well, it's a political platform then. But maybe we need to see what is going on. It's an important case.
It would be fascinating, yeah.
Maybe we do need to see it.
Will he get his way, I wonder? We'll find out anyway. We're going to be talking to Steve Gill, who's a friend of the programme. He'll be staying up very late at night in order to be able to talk to us.
He will.
So we better get on and talk to him as soon as possible. We'll be back in a couple of moments.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's 7:19. Good morning to you now. As the race to the White House heats up, well, it certainly seems to be heating up at the moment, doesn't it? Donald Trump, who is the leading contender for the Republican nomination, addressed a rally overnight in New Hampshire.
Now, the former president promised to, in his words, expel those horrible, horrible warmongers from government. Let's have a listen to what he said.
If you look at what's going on right now in the Middle East and Ukraine, and you add it up, and we have somebody that has no clue what the hell is going on, you're going to end up in World War III because of this. No reason for it. Millions of people will die. To me, peace through strength is not just a political slogan. It's actually a moral duty. And it's my commitment to you, the American people, but you will not have World War III. Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, shortly after we win the presidency, because we are going to win it, I'll have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It should have never started, but I'll get it settled. I know them both very well. With you at my side, and you've been at my side from the beginning, we will demolish the deep state. We're going to expel those horrible, horrible warmongers from our government. They want to fight everybody. They want to kill people all over the place, places we've never heard about before, places that want to be left alone. We will drive out the globalists. We will cast out the communists.
Well, let's talk to former presidential advisor and political commentator Steve Gill. Steve, morning to you. Really good to see you, as always. Look, it sounds good on the surface, doesn't it? You know, I promise you there will be no World War III. I promise I'll solve the situation between Russia and Ukraine. But it doesn't mean he's going to promise it in a way that Ukraine or the rest of the world would approve of.
Well, and he's already been pointing out that there were none of these wars when he was president. And I think a lot of people believe that with his strength, a lot of these moves by Putin and others would not have happened had he been president. Now, I don't think he can wave a magic wand and just quickly ease the tensions, particularly in the Middle East. But I think we can get back on a better track there. And Americans are war weary, and particularly funding weary of what's been sent to Ukraine with no apparent success. Even the Ukrainian military officials and government officials are acknowledging their prospects of winning are diminishing as each day goes by, and yet they want more and more billions. And you've got some of the presidential candidates, even the Republican primary, that want to write those blank checks forever and ever.
So when he says he wants to get rid of those horrible, horrible warmongers, he basically means the Biden administration, does he?
Well, I think he means the Biden administration and making sure that some of the people that are running in the Republican primary, although he's not talking about the primary, he's going right at Biden. And to his credit, is talking more about policies, not just the foreign policies, but he's talking more about domestic policies than he is kind of going off script and just kind of name calling. His New Hampshire speech was very much kind of a call to action, both domestically and in terms of foreign policy.
He is an amazing person, though, to be able to turn something that you'd think would be very negative against him into a positive. He's now calling for some of his trial to be televised.
Well, and I think that the courts will deny that, although I think some of these judges would love the TV time themselves. But it will underline his ability to say, I'm being prosecuted in the dark. They're doing this without you being able to see it. These are bogus cases, political persecutions, and they don't want you to see it. And I think that's going to be part of his pitch.
In that sense, you think he's calling for this knowing it's going to be refused? As though it's a tactic?
Oh, I think so. Although I think he'd love the TV time. And keep in mind that the Biden administration right now is absolutely freaking out. There have been some attempts to run ads to attack Trump because of his legal issues, and they're backfiring in the polling. We just had really bad poll numbers for Joe Biden in the key battleground states. And then when you've got all the Palestinian protest here, as you're seeing there, it's really created a divide in the Democratic Party. And he's trying to thread the needle, Biden, of keeping his anti-Hamas, pro-Israel, pro-Jewish support, and at the same time not alienate the Palestinian pro-Hamas protesters that we're seeing, particularly in some key battleground states that are putting Biden at further risk. Biden got about 70% of the Muslim vote 4 years ago. Right now, some polls are showing him only tracking with about a 20% approval rating in those demographics. And in some key battleground states, that almost makes it impossible for him to win re-election.
What is the timetable now? When do we actually hear which candidate has been chosen for what party?
You'll start seeing some elections. I think we've got the Iowa caucuses in January, and then the New Hampshire primary, which is where President Trump was speaking. So really in January and February, you're going to see this thing close down. But in the meantime, you've got some of these states where you have to qualify to get on the ballot coming to a close. And there are those thinking that Joe Biden, anybody opposing him, has to get on the ballot if they're going to challenge him in a primary immediately in order to prevent him from just sort of getting all the delegates and being the only guy on the ballot. But you've got a lot of third-party candidates that are starting to get on ballots across the country. And if third-party candidates are running with both Biden and Trump on the ballot as Republicans and Democrats, that may pull off just enough votes from Joe Biden to ensure a Trump victory.
Yeah. Essentially, though, we're looking at a race of two old men. What does that mean for the future of America? Well, it's a fair point, though, isn't it?
It is, and we're all going to get there. Hopefully, we'll get there with more cognitive ability than Biden and more self-control than Donald Trump. But I do think that it's going to mean a roller coaster ride. I'm going to be on a lot with you guys trying to explain it while I try to figure it out. Frankly, the whole political process in America right now is even more confusing than figuring out how to turn your palm without twisting your wrist.
Ah, yeah.
Actually, given the fact that those two candidates, if it ends up being a race between them, are quite old, it becomes very important as to who their running mates and therefore one day maybe their vice president may be. Are there any interesting candidates for those jobs?
You know, I think for Joe Biden, it would be almost impossible for him to dump Kamala Harris without creating a firestorm of controversy, particularly since she's an African-American woman. But at the same time, there are those that are still suspect that Joe Biden will not ultimately be the nominee, that he will step aside for health reasons. And there are beliefs that you get to the Democratic convention He has all the delegates aligned with him, and he can simply resign and pass his delegates to whoever he wants, which would be picking a Democrat nominee without anybody voting for them. That would be an issue for them. And then on Donald Trump's side, I think it's going to be interesting to see if he is in fact the nominee, who he picks as a vice president. The real political strategy is pick somebody who will do no harm. You don't usually win a race because of who your VP pick is, but when you've got very elderly people running, again, whether it's Biden or Trump, who that VP is, particularly with the viability of health issues for either candidate down the stretch, makes it even more important.
It really does.
Steve, really good to see you. Thank you very much
and
indeed.
keep practising the palm.
Yeah, well, here's one for you. Kishan Rees has been in touch, who's a doctor.
Oh, yes.
And says it is all about rotation in the elbow.
In the elbow.
And you can prove that by, if you do it, try doing it a third time.
Sorry.
So you go.
We know that Steve has been practising this in the States there. So hang on, you do it a third time.
Do it a third time. So you do...
Chest, up, down, across, up, down. You end up with the palm facing up.
And do it a third time.
Ooh, you can't. No, you can't. You can't move it.
No.
Ooh, spooky.
Because you can only rotate it so far.
Anyway, thank you very much, Steve Gill. Keep on practising it.
And thank you very much, Kish, for that.
Does he explain why you can't do it the third time?
No, it hasn't gone that far.
You've obviously rotated something that won't rotate again.
Yeah, well, it must, because you've got two bones you've got two bones in your arm, so they must twist that way.
Very
and they twist so far.
There you
go.
Who would have thought, eh? Party tricks. Got any good party tricks for Christmas parties?
Yeah, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com. Coming up for you, GB News star Nigel Farage is heading to the jungle. Experts say TikTok could prove crucial to his success. Why, you ask? No idea, but we'll try and find out in Headline Makers.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's
my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It is 7:32 this Sunday morning. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
And joining us to go through some of the day's headlines are the writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and the journalist and writer Ella Whelan.
Yeah.
So, see what I did there? No.
Very clever. Before we have a chat, ladies, let's just bring you up to date with the Sunday newspapers this morning. The Sunday Times says hate, intolerance and arrests as thugs hijack Armistice Day.
The Mail on Sunday leads with Michael Gove jostled and abused by pro-Palestine hate mob.
Sunday Mirror has right-wing mob in cop clash, laying the blame with the Home Secretary.
And the Observer writes, calls grow for Israel to hold fire in Gaza as marchers throng London.
Yeah, I'm not really sure that it's going to actually make any difference in that sense. But, who's Netanyahu going to listen to? A lot of people in London?
Exactly.
Don't think so.
Are they making their decisions based on us marching here and across Europe? I don't think so.
No. Emma, you've been looking at all this, but actually, although there has been a lot of focus on, because there was some violence from the anti-protest, if you like, but also what is worrying is these anti-Semitic signs that were spotted in the pro-Palestine rally.
Yeah, there have been pockets of people, and there have been men, and it is men, wearing these Hamas-style sort of, face coverings, and there have been people displaying the flag. And I think what's going to be quite interesting, the Met Police have said we know that everything is filmed these days, there's a lot of footage. The police have said they have facial super recognisers, they have all sorts of very, very sophisticated technology, and that they are going to follow up, they are going to pursue these individuals. Anyone who is identified will be held to account.
And so they should be.
Of course they should. And I just want... I mean, the Hamas flag is clearly a symbol of aggression and designed to instill fear in people when it's being displayed like this on arches.
I mean, we were showing pictures
and
some
you do
of these
see people with their faces
coverings that are clearly...
What do you feel about that? That's threatening. I was going through Bethnal Green and there were a couple of men with faces covering and flags hanging out of their car. For whatever reason, they weren't aggressing me, but I felt frightened. It is an aggressive display in that way. So let's see what the police do in terms of the follow-up after this weekend is over.
Well, they did follow through, didn't they, with those the 2 women who were wearing the badge on the back of their coats with the
paraglide.
Yeah, and they did follow that through, and those women are going to have to appear in court.
Yeah. It worries me, about the desensitising of people if you start to show really awful pictures. But I do wonder if there should have been some pictures released of what happened on October the 7th to show people some of the horror of it all.
Well, obviously, this is anti-Semitism in 2023, which is that it's the oldest hatred with the most easy sort of expression, because there's, as Emma has pointed out, there is the very obvious sort of pro-Hamas displays, but there is also a kind of multi examples throughout the protests. And obviously not everyone. There's enough examples at the protests to make you wince of a sort of almost banal anti-Semitism at this point. So pictures of Netanyahu with blood dripping out of his mouth, horns calling him the puppet master, obvious anti-Semitic rhetoric about Jews running the world and about, blood libels and things like that. I mean, that's kind of, in some instances, now become almost commonplace. I mean, we've been talking about a sort of low-level anti-Semitism that in particular, you know, the British left have turned a blind eye to, unfortunately. You know, images of people saying, keep the world clean, putting the Israel flag in the bin. You know, all of this is sort of obvious to any Jewish person of what it really means.
Well, I mean, it's exactly what was happening with Hitler, wasn't it? It's how all that started.
How many times have we heard never again?
Yes.
And even this chant about from the river to the sea, people are pretending this is open to interpretation, and it may be. But really, when you have a group of people like Jews saying how that makes them feel, would it not be the right thing to say, OK, we will not be chanting? You can't pretend that that is not, you know, deeply offensive.
And I suppose, I mean, this is David Baddiel's argument, Jews don't count, which is that if there was any other, say, for example, you had people chanting the N-word or people saying words like a faggot or things like that, but deeply offensive words, which, you know, you could have an argument, oh, it used to mean this or it used to mean that or whatever, you know, there would be no tolerance for that whatsoever. But when it comes to things that could be interpreted as either way in relation to anti-Semitic chants, it does feel like Jews are always being told, oh, why are you getting so het up about this? You know, why are you so sensitive about this? It really means this. And there's an obvious discrepancy there. As it happens, my free speech stance stands on this, and I think that people should be allowed to say awful things. Because I think that a thing we have to consider tactically is that we know that this kind of the Islamist sentiment and also anti-Semitic sentiment festers underground. It festers under censorship, and radicalisation is a problem behind closed doors. So I think the more debate about this and the more sunlight we can show on this and challenge this in the public square, not by idiot far-right thugs, but by genuine people who go along and to these protests and say, OK, but what about Hamas? OK, but let's have a genuine conversation about this. That needs to happen.
Everything is
and
weaponized.
I'm so shocked at how much anti-Semitism has been festering.
I am really shocked.
Just within our normal communities, just within sort of middle-class groups of mums that I know saying they're joining the marches, assuming that everybody is going on these marches with their children and that that October the 7th almost didn't happen.
Yeah. Look, the Prime Minister released a statement in response to what we saw yesterday, and he said, I condemn the violent, wholly unacceptable scenes we've seen today from the EDL, that's the English Defence League, and associated groups, and Hamas sympathisers attending the National March for Palestine. Well, that's about as diplomatic as you can be.
Got to say, he must have really worried over every word.
Yeah. But I mean, this is a weird thing to say, but I'm sort of heartened in reflection about the scale of the far-right protest, because if this is the extent of the organised far-right in the UK, we don't have some kind of drug-addled, drunk, idiot thugs who are looking to kind of bust an eyebrow with someone else, basically, and masking it as in defence of the cenotaph, then we don't have too much to worry about. But because the EDL have spent, you know, years now having an annual day out in Brighton where they go and sort of try and, you know, rough up a few people, and that's about it. It's not the kind of serious political force with the serious public support that it had 30, 40, 50 years ago. That's not to downplay their behaviour, but the interesting thing is that anti-Semitism, you know, Stephen, you said it's like, you know, what happened with the Nazis and Hitler, and there are elements of that and overtones of that. But the difference here is that anti-Semitism today it's not simple. It's a kind of awful mix of things. There's a sort of Islamist element to it, there's the old school far-right element to it, and there's also this kind of the willful ignorance of progressives as well. And that's all mixing together in this complicated kind of mesh that allows it to grow and fester. So it's not like the 30s and 40s, because it's not identifiably from a single political bloc. It's a kind of mess of forces being brought together. I mean, who'd have thought that you'd have similarities between radical Islamists and, I don't know, National Front throwbacks, but actually they share the anti-Semitism is something that they share.
It's horribly hate is what they shared, and I find that deeply shocking that so many people seem to enjoy hating.
Yeah,
and it's
bad for the soul.
I think the last few days have exposed what a horribly divided and unhappy country we are at the moment. There's just so much weaponising of people's ideas and taking sides and attacking each other. And that's not just on the extreme left and the extreme right.
Well, OK, let's have a look. Let's move focus, should we? before I get thoroughly and totally depressed.
Yeah.
To Nigel Farage.
Oh, well, there you go.
Who's always going to cheer us up a little bit. Ella, TikTok could be his way forward.
I don't know who's running his PR and who has convinced Nigel to go into the jungle. We'll wait to see. Maybe he'll be one of the best contestants ever.
He's going to win. He's going to win.
I am not convinced, particularly because the lineup. I think there's so many people in the lineup that are going to be going into that jungle wanting to take a lump out of him.
Let them try, I say.
Well, sure, but
they don't know him. They don't know that actually he will actually charm them.
He will.
I think it's a disaster, but I wait to be convinced otherwise. But you know, okay, you'd think Nigel Farage, one stereotype. You think old supporters, Brexit supporters, all those kind of stereotypes. In actual fact, the Mail picks up on he has a huge following on TikTok, racking about 6.5 million likes.
My goodness.
His videos about drinking pints, saying Brexit means Brexit, is obviously proving that. Surprise, surprise, not all young people are a monolithic political bloc and they do have different opinions. But the thing I would like to pick him up on is this sort of intolerable idea that politicians have, that if they get on reality TV, that's what will convince young people. You know, if they eat a few spiders in some outback somewhere, or rats' genitals, then all these young people will say, actually, I think your policy on foreign policy is really quite up. I agree with it. It's such a simplistic understanding of why people get political.
No, I don't think he has a point to prove, particularly at the moment. I think he's doing it partly perhaps for the money. Yeah. I think he's doing it because he loves being in the public eye. I think he's doing it probably for a laugh. He's also, isn't he, overnight, I think he's going to launch a legal battle against HSBC for the debanking...
NatWest.
NatWest, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
There you go.
But yes.
I don't think he's trying to win. I mean, I think he's trying to win.
That's what he said, as much as you can take anything. He said, he says, these are people who don't really watch the news, 10 million young people who watch this programme. In my mind, if I was to do it, I might be able to connect with that audience.
Well,
OK, the £1 million fee might help, but,
the vote.
I'll tell you what's interesting about Nigel. I like Nigel a lot. And you don't have to agree with Nigel to like him. And I know a lot of people who watch his show here on GB News who like it because it's a discussion show.
Yeah.
And he's open to discuss things and have someone who really diametrically opposes him and talk it through.
Yeah, and he connects with people, and that's what I think that's what a lot of people like about...
Shall we have a look at one of his TikToks?
Oh, go on.
I think we've got one. Let's have a look.
Maybe 105 years ago, but the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month still matters in a huge way. St. Greta Thunberg, the girl that's going to save the world. And there she was in London, being arrested for a public order offence. The United Nations, well, that sounds grand, doesn't it? What a lovely idea. Should we accept refugees from Gaza? Of course, people will say yes. Remember, we've taken over 500,000 refugees in just the last handful of years.
There you go. He's good at it as well.
Short. He makes his point.
Yes, he does.
I wonder who does it then.
Some 25-year-old.
Oh, what? There has to be.
To be a young
whiz who does all that.
Yeah. He won't do that himself.
But he's very savvy. He knows how to connect out there, doesn't he?
I don't watch Jungle, but I think he's going to do brilliantly.
It might be the first time I'll watch it.
Oh, now, this is an interesting one, Emma.
Speaking of...
ULEZ, because obviously ULEZ is about as popular as a plate of...
Cold.
Well, yes, whatever. London's getting round ULEZ by putting poppies over their number plate.
Yeah, I don't know if we have the footage. Apparently, it was on these viral photos were on Facebook. Sort of feels somewhat disrespectful, doesn't it?
Oh, there we are.
Really.
Do you think?
It's a very big poppy over the number plate.
To be using the poppy in that way is probably...
I don't know. I mean, it's highly illegal. It's got to be said, it's illegal to disguise your number plate.
Yes.
But I do, nevertheless, sort of think it's been a bit of clever thinking. Not that I condone it, obviously.
I condone it. Fair play to them. I mean, if you're whatever, illegal behaviour, but whatever you can do, the amount of money that has been made out of ULEZ fines is eye-watering. And if you think about that in relation to the state of the roads, potholes and all the rest of it, I sound like an old woman now. But anything to thwart the ULEZ is OK in my book. I don't care what you use.
The bill of
poppies,
repairing
daisies.
ULEZ cameras that have been sabotaged is huge as well. So it's costing us all money.
I heard about someone actually just a couple of days ago who had to change their van because they couldn't afford to use their old van. They changed their van. They got one that fell within the safe rules, broke down within a couple of days, and has cost them £3,000.
Yeah, and this is people who are running small businesses or older people or whatever.
It's going to finish them. It's going to finish them.
And I also object to the waste, the absolute waste of so many cars and vans that are maybe just out of the, you know, kind of ULEZ compliant restrictions, which are just being wasted, which we're going to put eventually into landfill, and get new cars for everybody, which they can't afford.
Yeah.
Such a shame.
I just think it's a scam, but it's Sadiq Khan's poll tax.
It is, and there's been so little consultation with Londoners on this and other cities around the UK. And also that research and the findings about ULEZ and about air pollution were very, very inconclusive.
Shaky,
They were shaky. There was suggestion in, you know, repeat across the media that people had been leaned upon to say, yeah, ULEZ looks great, or they've been asked to strengthen their opinions about that, which simply, you know, the evidence was not there. So I think Sadiq Khan needs to be a lot more accountable to for this.
Could it be the death knell for him?
The thing about London is that it's, you know, obviously it's split in many ways, but there's a very deep class divide in London. And I think a lot of the kind of ULEZ sentiment does run along class lines. So there are lots of... I mean, that might be unfair, but to talk generally, there's a kind of middle-class Londoners who like green stuff. They, you know...
Got their expensive cars.
Yeah, or they get cabs, whatever. They don't do... You know, they're not care workers who need a car. They're not, I don't know, you know, labourers or people who work in, you know, your plumber, your whatever, who needs a car to get around. So they're fine with it. Green credentials, no problem. A lot of young people, like we were just talking about in the last hour, who don't drive. Oh, green stuff, very nice.
Yeah.
And then there's the sort of servant class of London who has to serve London, who needs vehicles, who are very against it. You know, there is a solution to this, which is just, you know, everybody thinks, you know, having more choice is a nice thing. Put on a big push for public transport. Yeah, exactly. Pile all the money into public transport. Double all the bus. You know, trying to get a bus in London can sometimes be a nightmare. Up that, and I bet you more people will take buses and read your book nicely on the bus. Who wouldn't like to do that rather than sat in traffic? But instead, he goes for the punitive approach.
Except that when you go on the tube or a bus, no one is reading books anymore, and everybody's staring at their phone. But apart from that,
or looking for bed bugs.
Spot on.
Can
No,
read a
people
book
are not
on your
reading
phone.
books on the tubes and trains. Sadly.
Can we, Ella, tell us about this footage that's been going viral about what happened in a pub when diners wanted to get a refund on their food.
This is hilarious. So, at a pub in the Observatory in Blackburn, a woman complained and said that in her £12.95 roast there was a hair, and it was just disgusting, and that she wanted a refund. And the owner went to look at the footage to make sure that his staff had their hair tied back, and actually found that the customer herself had tweaked one out of her own scalp and put it into the food in order to try and, you know, lie. She was lying and to say...
there she is, she's doing it.
Putting it in. Which is, you know, in the old days you used to just do a mad dog, which is you'd run out without paying. But this seems slightly less dignified, which is putting your own clawing out clumps of your hair and putting it into the food. But really, you know, unacceptable, rude on the staff, and should be barred.
The camera that's looking at her doing that, is that just a general camera that's
CCTV in a restaurant, filmed everywhere. Everything we do, every movement nowadays is covered by some kind of CCTV, isn't it?
Mind you,
in a restaurant.
I don't blame him.
No, I don't blame him at all.
I don't blame them, because if that, you know, the sheer nerve of someone saying, "Oh, we'll go out for Sunday dinner." Yeah. We'll go out for dinner.
Probably ate most of it, and then
ate most of it, and then we'll not pay. What a blooming cheek.
Yeah.
Actually.
It is pretty nasty, though, when you see people who are serving or people who are working in the kitchens or whatever with their hair down, and you want to say, please, come on, please. I mean, hair falls out, you know, long hair falls out, it does. Especially around sort of food hygiene and things. I think that, you know, does highlight that. But, yeah, she clearly whipped out her hair and chucked it in.
That is awful. But I do worry about the fact that we are all being watched by cameras all the time.
Well, we often talk about Stephen's camera surveillance of his own home.
Not on air, we don't. But we can do. No, I've got cameras around the house and things. Yeah. They follow you about as well.
I know, that's what I find so creepy. even in your own home, I find it really creepy.
Well, it's not that we look at each other when we're not there.
Was it to catch the cat when he's doing something funny?
It could catch the cat, yeah, but it's also, you know, it's if you got broken into.
Yeah.
Then you can see.
You would
what's
have the
going
footage,
on.
absolutely.
The thing that I find really alarming is the Ringo cameras, you know, on people's front doors, because there's, you know, before you go into a party, you sort of kind of get yourself.
Yeah.
Right, you have to mentally prepare yourself to knock on the door and get that. The idea that someone could watch me sort of smell, you know, before I go in is a total invasion
or the
of
whole
privacy.
sort of, we don't want to be. We'll get out in half an hour.
We'll agree. We'll leave at 8. Okay. Yeah, that kind of thing.
There you are. You've just got to remember you're always being watched by a camera then, aren't you?
Yes, if you could afford one, because if bank of mum and dad haven't got much money left, Emma, according to the Mail.
Yeah, the Bank of Mum and Dad. God, who has mums and dads like this? I've never had mums and dads like this, but the Bank of Mum and Dad in the UK is dishing out around 98 billion over the past 5 years to their grown-up children. 98 billion.
Well, you have to. It's to help them get on the housing ladder.
I know what it's for. It's for housing ladder, and it's for help with bills and all of this. But I just don't know these parents who give their children. I mean, my parents had 5.
I think it is a big worry that actually there's a generation now of parents, the sort who would think I'll help my children out with this.
Who can afford to do it.
Who are spending their pension doing it, or are taking. In fact, you're actually encouraged to those loans that you can have on
your property.
Yes, what's it called?
Payday.
It's a.
I know what you mean.
You sort of leverage it against your house.
Yeah, and apparently an awful lot of older parents are doing that, releasing equity. Yeah. They're doing that to help their children, and they could actually be endangering their own retirement by doing so.
Well, I think there's also a lot of parents who are doing this who are wealthy and are doing it in a cunning kind of tax wheeze. You pass the money over, 7 years before your death so that they don't end up paying tax duties, all of that. I know people. I'm very envious of them. They get a big chunk from their parents to buy houses. I mean, this is astonishing to me. But
well, if you've got it, that's fair enough.
Great. If you've got wealthy parents and they want to give you 50 grand or 100 grand to put down a deposit. And look, let's be honest, nowadays property is so expensive and prohibitive for young people that they need all the help they can get.
No, but 98 billion though.
It's up and it's split. I mean, obviously in London where there tends to be richer people, but also there's less housing and less opportunities for young people to get on the housing ladder. 23.8 billion in London, compared to 1.9 billion in the northeast. So obviously it's
predominantly the southeast. Exactly.
Ladies, thank you, Emma, Ella. We'll see you a little bit later on. In the meantime, let's get a check on the weather for you with Jonathan.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a frosty and foggy start for some of us, but it is going to be turning increasingly wet and windy thanks to this area of low pressure out in the Atlantic and its associated fronts that are pushing their way in from the southwest, already bringing some heavy areas of rain spreading into parts of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Some of the fog across northeast England into Scotland could linger into the first part of this afternoon, but once it does clear, we will see some sunny spells developing here. Temperatures generally in the realms of 7 to 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling quite cold where the fog does linger and underneath the most persistent cloud and rain. For this evening, we'll watch this band of rain push its way northwards, eventually reaching areas of Scotland, but we've got another area of rain pushing in from the southwest. This again turning things very wet across England and Wales into Northern Ireland later on, and with some very strong winds pushing in across this as well. And amongst all the cloud and rain, it's going to be a milder night for most of us, but still across parts of Scotland getting down into mid or low single figures. The detail of this rain for Monday is still a bit uncertain, so it is worth staying up to date with the forecast, but it will be quite a widely unsettled morning with that area of heavy rain moving in. Some sunshine and showers feeding in for areas of England and Wales later on in the afternoon, but a swathe of gales pushing through here, so still very unsettled. Showers and quite breezy for northern areas of Scotland as well. Temperatures on the chart between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. We hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part of the week as well, with more sunshine and showers. Bye-bye.
Well, the weather may not be putting a smile on your face, particularly at the moment, and certainly the news probably won't either. So we're asking you, what makes you happy? We've already had quite a few people writing in. So what makes you happy? GB Views at gbnews.com.
Yes, love to hear from you. Back with all the headlines in just a second.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I'm was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning to you. We are rapidly approaching 8 o'clock on Sunday, the 12th of November. Today.
Again on Remembrance Sunday follows that familiar solemn scene in Whitehall as around the cenotaph centres the time-honoured, unchanging ceremonial.
Lest we forget, it is Remembrance Sunday, and the King, the Prime Minister and dignitaries from around the country and the Commonwealth will lay wreaths at the cenotaph in London today, where a major policing operation is still in place after those arrests and disturbances yesterday.
Well, our GB News reporters will be live across the country as we bring you events up and down the land as we remember those who sacrificed their lives to give us the freedoms we enjoy today.
The Supreme Court is due to give its decision this coming week on whether the government's controversial Rwanda plan is lawful. We'll be looking at how Downing Street may react to the court's ruling and how Tory rivals plan to react.
As we think of wars of the past today, wars of today, Ray John, the conflict in the Middle East dominating our domestic politics, of course, while the spotlight has moved from the war in Ukraine. We're going to be talking to a former KGB spy to try to look at the bigger picture.
The Communities Secretary, Michael Gove, was mobbed by pro-Palestinian demonstrators yesterday as he walked through London's Victoria Station. We'll be talking about this and more in Headline Makers.
We'll also have a check on your weather today with Jonathan.
There are some lovely frosty and foggy scenes around this morning, but those will be quickly replaced by wetter and windier conditions. Join me for the full weather details later on.
And Aidan is here with all your latest sport.
Yes, good morning. In the Premier League, there was relief for under pressure Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag as United defeated Luton at Old Trafford. Elsewhere at Bournemouth, Newcastle and England defender Kieran Trippier was involved in an angry exchange with his own fans.
Oh dear. Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and you're watching Breakfast on GB News.
Look, we've been saying this for a couple of years, really. It's been a grim couple of years, news-wise. So I say it's just political news. You can take it or leave it, but there's a lot of really serious, heavy stuff going on at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I found that sort of serious, hardened journalists that I know very well, who've been in wars, reporting from all over the place, finding this particular war. Ukraine was bad enough, and still is, of course, mustn't forget. But this is what's happening in Israel and Gaza is so unutterably dreadful and depressing that they have actually said, you know, that they've given up reading the newspapers, or they're not looking at the television news anymore.
Just need to give their brains a rest. It's too much. So we've been asking what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Just to give us a little bit of sort of light relief, if you like, and it's the everyday things. And you've been in touch. Lynn, good morning to you, Lynn. Says, morning, Stephen and Anne. Wonderful show as always. Thank you very much indeed. Had a sleepover with this little fella last night. That's...
I think that's... I don't know whether that's what we should be watching. I think that might be the wrong graphic. I think we're after...
Yes, that's from Jenny. Now, let me tell you, that's Jenny, who says, then that's her two dogs, Paddington and Lucy, always make me smile.
Great names, yeah.
That's Paddington and Lucy. I was going to say, it definitely didn't seem right, because it was meant to be Jake.
There we are.
There we go, and this was from
This is
Lynn.
Lynn's grandson, Jake, who came over last night for a sleepover. And she says, Mummy and Daddy went to a ball for parents of children lost to cancer, namely that little boy's brother, Ollie. So she says, you can show this image because this little man is very precious.
Oh, yes. Absolutely so. And it's good that makes you smile.
See, that's what's important, isn't it?
It makes you smile in the midst of the pain that you've been through. And it's about remembering... the good stuff.
Good things in life, yes, as well. So if you've got any more that you'd like to send in, do the usual way, gbviews@gbnews.com. Any nice pictures? What makes you smile, even though, you know, the news can be very depressing? What puts a smile on your face? Share it with us, please.
Oh, yeah, please do. Looking at that news then this morning, and 300,000 or thereabouts pro-Palestinian protesters calling for a Gaza ceasefire marched in central London yesterday. It's thought it was the biggest rally since the Israel-Gaza war began.
People attended with children, and it was largely peaceful, although dozens of counter-protesters were arrested by the Metropolitan Police for a number of offences.
Right, let's head to three of our reporters across the country. Cameron Walker, Olivia Utley, Doogie Beattie join us now. And let's start with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who's at Horse Guards Parade, because obviously with whatever happened yesterday on Armistice Day, today, Cameron, as Remembrance Sunday, is the National Day of Remembrance.
Oh, absolutely, Stephen. And as you can probably imagine, in central London today, there is a lot of security. But at Horse Guards Parade, there is a sense of camaraderie, solidarity and remembrance. Now, I'm joined by two very special people, Alf and Kim Cupper, both veterans themselves. Kim, if we can first start with you. What inspired you to join the army in the first place?
To see the world, to be honest. I joined the WRAC in 1984. And my first posting was out to Germany, so I got what I wanted, and then from then on in started going to different countries and doing lots of exciting things.
Wonderful. And Alf, just tell me the story about how you were reunited with your wife in Iraq in 2003.
Yeah, we were both on Optelic and didn't know that each of us were in the same location at the same time. We deployed from different countries at different times. So walking through a sandstorm with the Padre from 7 Armour Brigade, in the distance I saw someone coming towards me, and it could have been nobody other than Kim. And that was it. We had a 10-minute cup of tea together in Iraq.
Oh, wonderful. And tell me about some of the medals you have on your chest today.
I have the Kosovo medal. I went there with the 21 Sigma Regiment Heli Force, which was absolutely an amazing tour. Northern Ireland, Iraq, the Queen's Jubilee medal. Long service medal, long service and good conduct medal, and continuous service as well.
And both of you have done lots of fundraising for the Royal British Legion. How important is the charity to you both, and why is this important that people across the country support them?
Well, Cameron, the RBL do an amazing job all year round, not just in November. And so what we'd like to promote is support for the Royal British Legion in everything that they do. You know, this effort that they do this time of year should never go away and should be supported forever.
And you both have children who are serving, don't you? Just tell me about your 2 sons and what your daughter would hope to do.
So we've got 5 children altogether, 3 of which have served, 2 are still serving, and both are in the Royal Artillery. And our daughter, Molly, aged 15, is hoping to be a police officer and was a Gloucestershire police cadet.
So a whole family of service. And how important is it for the younger generation to still remember those who have fought and served in the armed forces in the United Kingdom?
I think the sacrifices that have been made by all that have gone before us in longer campaigns, older campaigns and more recent ones is something that needs to be remembered, perhaps taught and never ever wiped away.
Wonderful. Alf, Kim, thank you so much for speaking to us on GB News. Really appreciate it. Well, at 11 o'clock, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery will be firing their guns to mark the start and the end of the 2-minute silence here in central London.
Yeah, Cameron, it's interesting as well, isn't it? It's the first time in 70-something years that a king will lay a wreath at the cenotaph.
It's certainly the first time since a king's coronation that a king will be laying a wreath at the cenotaph. Last year, of course, he was already king. The Queen passed away in September 2022, but this is the first time since his coronation. The king's going to be joined by Her Majesty the Queen, who will be on the balcony of the Foreign Office, who will be accompanied by the Princess of Wales. The Prince of Wales will also be laying a wreath as well, and Queen Camilla's will be laying a wreath on her behalf. Of course, it's very poignant for the whole royal family. The King is Commander-in-Chief of all the armed forces here in the United Kingdom and indeed the other realms and territories where he is head of state. And Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, will be taking the salute at the march past here at Horse Guards Parade following that 2-minute silence for veterans to do their march past in central London.
Cameron, back to you later on. Thank you. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, who's in Westminster. A very big day for the royal family, very big day for politicians as well, actually, and hopefully putting on a united front.
Well, absolutely. And yesterday I was out and about in central London all day reporting on what was going on. And on the whole, the Metropolitan Police were proved right. It was a peaceful day. I was standing by the cenotaph for the 2-minute silence and you couldn't have heard a pin drop. There were some counter-protests. There were some far-right thugs. And then much later in the day, there was definitely some violence from the pro-Palestinian protesters as well. But the police did a very good job of keeping the two marches away from each other. Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Met, will be breathing a big sigh of relief today, and so will Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman. It'll be really interesting to see the way that Rishi Sunak behaves this morning. He will be there at the cenotaph. And of course, he has had a very, very difficult week. Just a couple of days ago, we were all expecting him to sack his own Home Secretary. And there's still huge pressure on him to do something about that notorious article that Suella Braverman wrote in the Times, where she appeared to pretty blatantly criticise the Met Police. But as you say, today is a day for pushing on at least a show of solidarity. And we'll see the leader of the opposition there, as well as the Prime Minister and other senior figureheads. Let's hope today passes off without incident and we have a few more dignified scenes than we saw yesterday evening.
Absolutely. Olivia, thanks very much indeed. Right, let's go to Doogie now, our Northern Ireland reporter, who was at the cenotaph in Belfast yesterday. I think that's where you are now as well, isn't it?
No, welcome to the southwest of the province. I'm actually in the town of Enniskillen. Enniskillen's known for having huge military history. Most of the young men that came from here served with the Enniskillen Fusiliers, and it was towns like this the whole way through the United Kingdom during the First World War that men were brought from. If you go to small towns outside Glasgow, they serve with the Black Watch. Then you have the Yorkshire regiments, and then of course in Northumberland their regiments were known as the Fighting Fist, and these towns lost many men then, so remembrance in these places was particularly poignant, I suppose. But this particular war memorial here holds some very sad history. In 1987, the IRA put a bomb here and it exploded, killing 12 people and injuring 63. And that is still felt right up till today. So later on this morning, it will be attended by many dignitaries, including the Secretary of State, and the Irish Taoiseach will be here, along with our own Baroness Foster, who will get along with proceedings here and spur time to remember not only the dead of the First and Second World War and other conflicts, but also those who lost their lives here in 1987 because of an IRA bomb.
Yeah, indeed. Doogie. OK, for now, thanks very much.
First time I think many of us had ever heard of Enniskillen.
It was.
Forget it.
It was.
Terrible atrocity that was.
OK. On Wednesday, let's look at looking ahead for you. The Supreme Court is set to give its decision on whether the government's Rwanda plan, yes, that one, is lawful.
Now, if the court rules in the government's favour, it's likely that we could see asylum seekers being sent to the African country by March of next year. Still going to take time, isn't it?
Isn't it just?
But the big question is what happens if the court rules that the policy is unlawful.
Let's talk to Frederick Chedham, who's defence spokesman for Reform UK. Good morning to you. What do we do then if this is ruled unlawful?
Well, good morning. It's quite clear that if it's ruled unlawful, the government has run out of road. There is nowhere else to go. It's made a number of attempts to wriggle past prohibitive legislation, principally the Human Rights Act, but also the ECHR. And I think in attempting to wriggle past that legislation, it's now run out of room. And it probably, my guess, is it will leave the whole problem as one for a potential Labour government to solve.
It just feels as though it's going to go on forever, doesn't it?
Well, it will, because under the current legislative circumstances, there is no opportunity to cause a breakthrough. If we can't allow our own courts to be supreme in the judgment of this matter, then we have no hope. The ECHR is a politically motivated organisation, or it's become a politically motivated organisation, and it's got no intention, assisted by a number of people in this country, of allowing us to conduct our own affairs. And while that situation continues, then they are quite happy for us to continue with the problem of illegal migration on the scale that it is.
It leaves you in a bit of a bind, though, doesn't it, as Reform UK? Because as much as you want to change things, should you have been in power this coming week, you're in the same boat as everybody else.
Ooh.
Can you hear us, Frederick? We've lost him.
Oh, we seem to have lost.
Oh,
right,
how
we'll
convenient! How convenient! Oh well, there you go. Never mind. You get the gist of it all. Now let's continue to look at conflict around the world, should we?
Yes, it's a strange day to do it, but I suppose it is very, very relevant. We're remembering our war dead today. And the war in the Middle East dominates our domestic politics. And it's easy to forget that there's actually another terrible war taking place in Eastern Europe, and we must not forget that either.
No, we must not. But does this mean we're in an era of heightened global conflict? Let's talk to a man who knows. He's a military historian, but perhaps more interestingly, he's a former KGB officer, Alexander Vasiliev. Good morning to you. It's nice to see you. Can I ask you about that first and foremost? Because that's the tag which I suppose proves quite useful in getting interviews and things. Is it as sinister, or was it as sinister as we in the West were led to believe at the time?
Inside the KGB?
No, it was lovely.
Was it really?
What? Yeah. No, I think that KGB is being demonized, and actually Putin is being demonized too, because, you know, some experts and a lot of people in the media, they're saying, well, Putin is a monster because he is the next KGB. Doesn't mean anything.
Were you there with him?
No, almost. We trained practically at the same time, at the same place. That's why I know exactly how he was trained, because I was trained the same way by the same people in mid-1980s. I was trained even better because I was there in the KGB spy school. I was 2 years, and he was just one. So I'm better than Putin. Can you imagine? But thing is that being in KGB, especially in the intelligence service, doesn't explain anything about Putin. It means nothing, absolutely nothing, right? Because there were people, especially in the intelligence service, quite liberal people. Putin was liberal. He was very much pro-Western. If you look, for instance, he was interviewed by a group of Russian journalists before becoming president of Russia in the year 2000, and he said, for instance, that Russian culture is Western European culture, down to the Far East. He didn't say European culture, Western European culture. He wanted to be closer to NATO. He discussed with Bill Clinton, he discussed an idea about Russia joining NATO. Then you may remember the Winter Olympic Games of 2014. Then you may remember the Football World Cup of 2018. Why did he do this? Because he wanted to show Russia's human face to the world.
So how can he go from that to... I mean, look, we saw it coming for a long time, the idea that he was almost trying to crown himself Tsar with a president, then prime minister, then change the law and back to being president again. So he's almost become like a sort of Tsar-like figure, if you like. But to go from that to someone who appears to be, at least to us, an extremist now.
No. Thing is, Putin is not a Russian nationalist. Putin is an imperialist. These are different things, right? Putin is not anti-Semitic, and he is not an Islamophobe. He's got Jewish friends who became very rich thanks of him. Thing is, in order to understand Putin, you need to know what life was like in 1990s under Boris Yeltsin. And it was total disaster for most people. It was wonderful, by the way, for the journalists. I'm also a journalist, by the way. It was wonderful. It was free, and I could write. I worked for a national newspaper. I had my TV show on the First Channel, and I really said anything I wanted. Right?
Which would be quite a new thing.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is that if you compare, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many Russians, Putin actually saved Russia from total collapse of the situation to which Yeltsin brought.
But you say he's imperialist.
Yes.
Which is the reason that he sees Ukraine as Russian and wants to take Ukraine.
It's not his idea. We need to talk here about Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Solzhenitsyn is Putin's favorite author. Putin visited Solzhenitsyn at his home when he was alive. Putin, about 5 years ago, I think, Putin opened a monument to Solzhenitsyn personally in Moscow. In 1990, Solzhenitsyn wrote a big article which was published by my newspaper, which was called "How Should We Rebuild Russia?" And it was still the Soviet Union. And Solzhenitsyn was very anti-communist, and he said, well, to hell with the Soviet Union, we don't need it. What we need to do is to build Greater Russia, which would include Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, and northern Kazakhstan as well. Now, that's not Putin's idea, that's Solzhenitsyn's idea.
But Putin's following it through.
Yeah, it's following it, but I think it's a program maximum, and it obviously failed because there is a new generation of Ukrainians who happen to believe that it was up to them to decide the future of their country, not up to Solzhenitsyn.
Can I just ask about how we deal with Putin then? Because, I mean, it's interesting hearing Donald Trump say, if I were president now, none of this would have happened. Because clearly Donald Trump believes in going and meeting and making friends with some of these characters like Putin. Would that work?
I think it would. I think it is possible for Western countries to be, well, not at least not enemies with Putin, but you should take into account not only personal Putin's worries, but Russia's worries and problems of most Russians. For instance, NATO. NATO is not regarded by most Russians as a peaceful defense organization. It's, in their opinion, NATO is a very much aggressive organization. If you want to talk about...
That's not true, is it?
Oh, really?
No, well, no, but come on. But the fact that Russians may think that doesn't make it true. In the same way, we think the KGB is some evil spy network. That's all down to propaganda.
Stephen, look, a typical Russian answer to this would be, well, what about the invasion of Iraq? What about the invasion of Afghanistan? What about the destruction of Libya? And you wanted to do the same thing to Syria. What about the bombing of Belgrade in 1999? NATO is not a peaceful organization.
No, but that wasn't done under the guise of NATO necessarily.
Yeah, well, but they were
no, NATO members.
They were NATO members. Now let's talk about Ukraine. Ukraine joining NATO. Let's suppose for a second that Ukraine joins NATO, including Crimea. Let's look at the map of the Black Sea. What do we see? The Black Sea becomes a NATO lake because in the north we'll have Ukraine, in the east, in the west we'll have Romania and Bulgaria, in the south we'll have Turkey, all the NATO countries, and in the east we'll have Georgia, which wants to join Ukraine. So NATO becomes, the Black Sea becomes a NATO lake. What about Sebastopol? Sebastopol was our Navy base since the 18th century.
But how do we get past that? I mean, today is Remembrance Sunday, when a lot of countries are remembering their war dead. And the last World War was literally all over the world. If we can't understand each other's viewpoints, as you've just pointed out, we see the KGB as an evil spy network. You say NATO is. If we can't see each other's points of view, we'll never get on. We'll always have war.
No, I think that the West made a big mistake with Russia. Russia is terribly misunderstood. And I'm not trying to be Putin's advocate. I mean, I see good and bad things about him. But he's terribly misunderstood, and Russia is terribly misunderstood because people can't see the different situations from the Russian point of view. For instance, Ukraine. It's terrible. No, the front line is not moving anywhere. The Ukrainian so-called counteroffensive failed. According to the Russian sources, Ukrainians lost tens of thousands of people during this attempt of counteroffensive, just for nothing. Nothing happened, right? And now about Crimea. Well, Ukrainians believe that they want it back. Now, most Russians believe that they got it back in 2014 because until 1954, Crimea was a part of Russia. And it was a decision by the Soviet totalitarian regime to make it a part of Ukraine. No one asked anyone in Crimea whether they want it or not. And according now to legal experts in Russia, that violated even Soviet laws. even Soviet laws. So
but if we're going to start fighting over borders that are, I mean, all borders have been porous and have moved over the years.
You can't keep looking back, can we?
It's that similar to what's happening in the Middle East, isn't it? With Israel, should Israel exist? Where are the borders if there's two-state solution? We've got to start looking forward and not backwards, haven't we?
Well, we can start looking forward. Achieving some ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. Henry Kissinger about a year ago said that there should be some scheme, land for peace. Kissinger. That let's suppose let's give Russia to Russia Crimea and Donbass to Russia and sign a peace treaty, because there is no. I can't see any other way. The front line is moving nowhere, and the people that just killing each other. Just for nothing.
You're wearing a poppy today.
Yes, I am.
Why are you wearing a poppy?
Well, it's about wars and veterans. My grandfather was a veteran of both World Wars. He was a Marine in the First World War in the Baltic Sea. He was heavily wounded, survived. Then he became a surgeon. He was decorated by Soviet order for his work as a surgeon in 1930s. Then when the Second World War started, he was drafted to the army. He was at Stalingrad.
Was he?
Oh yes, he was awarded the Order of a Red Star. It's actually a big deal.
Oh yes.
And he ended the war in Hungary. So to me, it's extremely important.
Alexander, it's fascinating to talk to you. And I tell you what is important is to hear a perspective that we haven't thought of before. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with that perspective, but it's important to try and broaden our understanding, isn't it, as to what is going on. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Really good to see you. I mean, it's very easy to say, Putin's the devil and it all needs, we need to just take him out or whatever it may be.
That's not the answer either.
But it's not the answer, is it? No, you have to try and understand it from all angles, which is why things are always more complex than they seem.
Yeah. And it's a good day to reflect on that sort of thing.
Yes, it is.
Isn't it?
It is.
Should we find out what the weather's doing? Here's Jonathan.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a frosty and foggy start for some of us, but it is going to be turning increasingly wet and windy thanks to this area of low pressure out in the Atlantic and its associated fronts that are pushing their way in from the southwest, already bringing some heavy areas of rain, spreading into parts of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Some of the fog across northeast England into Scotland could linger into the first part of this afternoon, but once it does clear, we will see some sunny spells developing here. Temperatures generally in the realms of 7 to 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling quite cold where the fog does linger and underneath the most persistent cloud and rain. For this evening, we'll watch this band of rain push its way northwards, eventually reaching areas of Scotland, but we've got another area of rain pushing in from the southwest. This again turning things very wet across England and Wales into Northern Ireland later on, and with some very strong winds pushing in across this as well. And amongst all the cloud and rain, it's going to be a milder night for most of us, but still across parts of Scotland getting down into mid or low single figures. The detail of this rain for Monday is still a bit uncertain, so it is worth staying up to date with the forecast, but it will be quite a widely unsettled morning with that area of heavy rain moving in. Some sunshine and showers feeding in for areas of England and Wales later on in the afternoon, but a swathe of gales pushing through here, so still very unsettled. Showers and quite breezy for northern areas of Scotland as well. Temperatures on the chart between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. We hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part of the week as well, with more sunshine and showers. Bye-bye.
Jonathan, thank you. Up next for you, what happened between Newcastle fans and Kieran Trippier after Newcastle's loss to Bournemouth yesterday? Oh, wasn't it a lot of fun? We'll get all the details from Aidan McGee in a couple of minutes.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life:
your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It is 8:33. Very good morning to you. Let's have a look at some of the other key stories heading into our newsroom this morning.
Well, Donald Trump, he's filed a legal motion backing media requests for live television coverage of his federal trial. And that's about, charges that he conspired to overturn the 2020 election. Anyway, Donald Trump is arguing that prosecutors want the trial held in darkness as part of a politically motivated effort by President Joe Biden.
Doctors Without Borders have said hospitals throughout the Gaza Strip have been under relentless bombardment in the last 24 hours, with local authorities saying, that's Hamas-led authorities, it's worth pointing out, that more than 11,000 people have died in Israel's military operation. Doctors Without Borders has reiterated its calls to stop the attacks against hospitals and for an immediate ceasefire.
And the King and Queen have unveiled statues of the late Queen Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh as they arrived last night for the Royal British Legion Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall. They're life-sized bronze artworks commemorating the former Queen and her husband's dedication to the concert hall, and they were installed as part of its 150th anniversary. What makes you happy?
Oh.
Christine in Cumbria, morning Christine, says, a sunny day, feeding the birds, being taken out by my granddaughters who can now drive, having a UK holiday with my daughters, one at a time. I also love watching television, thanking you. Well, thank you, Christine.
Yeah. Oh, where in Cumbria are you, Christine? Let me know. Tracy says, what makes us happy is spending time with our lovely rescue dog, Quentin, known as Quinny, Prince Quentin or Monkey Head.
You're like I am. I call the dog everything. My dog's got lots and lots of different names. Yeah, I can reel them off. I know.
We've started calling Rex, the dog, we've started calling him Rexinold.
Well, there you are, you see.
Well, where does that come from?
I don't know. Why do people do that? But I do. Dale says, I wake up every weekend to my grandson, Hunter, who smiles at me and makes me feel great.
That is lovely, actually. I mean, it's a bit of a shock to the system when you're woken up by a little one, isn't it? But it's lovely. John says, taking my Staffordshire Bull Terrier Buddy for an early morning walk gives me time to enjoy the silence. No bad news, no phone, no people, no pressure. Best time of day. I agree with that entirely. It just gives you that chance to clear your head, breathe the fresh air, enjoy the countryside, forget about everything else.
But don't do it for the moment, because Aidan's here and he'd like to tell you all the sports news.
How you doing? Nice to see you.
Yeah, all right. See you.
Interesting, actually. I've got something for you. I'm going to play it for you in a moment. It's about when sports stars hit back. And what I mean by that is the Newcastle defender and England defender, Kieran Trippier, 33 years old, experienced player. He just took umbrage to some of the, I wouldn't call it abuse necessarily, but there's some criticism from the Newcastle fans who travelled all the way down from the northeast to Bournemouth, spent their money early evening kick-off as well, so awkward time to get back from home. They lost 2-0, quite a listless performance, had some injuries. Let's play it now. This is what happened when Kieran Trippier went up to the Newcastle fans afterwards to respond to their abuse.
I can't work out what he said.
No, what was he saying?
He said he made the point. There was nothing vicious. He was very forcible about what he was saying. But he was saying, look, how many injuries have we got? This is why we're not playing well. And he said that, are you telling us we're not giving our all out there? And I think he's got a point, because they've been going pretty well over the last... They've had Saudi money behind them, so they should be going well. But it's not often that you would see a player respond to that. He didn't swear at them or anything like that.
No, actually, I think that's quite healthy, isn't it?
Yes, and he said afterwards...
Because those guys who were yelling abuse, if that's what it was, or at least criticism, they will actually have enjoyed the fact that he came over to them and took them seriously.
I was talking to someone in there just about 10 minutes ago, and I said, did you notice that when he went up to the fans, they just stood off him and offered their hand, go, oh, it's great to see you. Oh, it's wonderful that you've taken time to engage with us.
Oh, I think that's really good.
And it's right. It was wrong of me to say abuse. I know to say it's abuse, but it was certainly criticism. Yeah, it was a bad performance, but they're not in a bad position. They just had a bad week, and I just think sometimes, it's an example of how spoiled fans can get. They've been on a really upward trajectory in the last couple of years, and they have a couple of bad results. Won the Champions League in midweek, and then down at Bournemouth yesterday, thinking their team has the rights almost to turn up and beat these teams.
Yeah, but I tell you what, they're within their rights.
Yes, they are.
For the fans, they're within their rights to ask the question.
True.
And I think that's fair enough. And I do think it's quite nice that he responded. I think he gave some reason.
He gave an interview afterwards as well, saying, look, it's all fine, we're in a good position. I've just explained to the supporters what I felt.
Exactly.
But he was...
Because I suppose that with the football nowadays, some of the players are so remote, aren't they? They're so distant from their fans, because they are superstars.
They are. But, the superstar phenomenon isn't new. And what I would say now, though, Anne, and I studied this a lot when I did mental health stuff in my previous job, about in and around footballers and sports people, one thing that the older generation of players didn't have to deal with that the current lot do is social media. And they can go on social media, they can see 100 great comments, but the whole day be thrown out by just one nasty comment.
Yeah.
And they find it difficult to respond to that. And that's something the players in the 80s, 90s and early 2000s didn't have to deal with.
No.
Yeah. Man United. I mean, look, Ten Hag's breathing a sigh of relief.
Oh, he certainly is. I mean, he seems to get results, Stephen, when he needs it. I know. And suddenly it all looks a lot different. The stats look a lot different. I think it's 4 wins out of 5 in the Premier League. They're 3 points off the Champions League. I mean, goodness me, they're having a good season, aren't they? By all intents and purposes. But there are problems in the background. We've got a big day tomorrow. It's Sir Bobby Charlton's funeral, and then later in the week we're going to get some news on the takeover with Sir Jim Ratcliffe taking over 25% of it. We believe that's going to be officialised later in the week. So there's a lot going on, but it's an international break, so a chance to refresh and recharge and see where they go from there.
Officialised. I think that may be a new word, but I like it.
You like it? Officialised?
I like it.
It's like thronged.
What would you
say?
Yes. What would you say? Not officialised, if it wasn't
just made official, I guess.
Made official.
But officialised is good.
Yeah. All right, we'll see if we can get in the OED this time next year, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Do you reckon I can do it?
I reckon you can. I'm up for that. Let's have a quick look at Jack Draper, should we?
We should, yeah. Look, I mean, he was... don't be put out by the fact that he lost. He was up against 25th in the world, and as Stephen said a couple of hours ago, he still lost, He probably
don't paint me out to be the bad guy.
So he lost in 3 sets. He gave a good account of himself. He's had horrific shoulder injuries all year. He's dropped in the rankings a bit, but he's on his way back. And as you said a couple of hours ago, he's 21. He's got plenty of time on his side. Yeah. We're approaching the new... After Christmas, we'll get into the slam season and we'll see what he can do in the Australian, and obviously the French and Wimbledon after that. But as I say, excellent achievement. The youngest British player since Andy Murray in 2009 to get to an ATP final. And Murray won that one at the age of, I think he was 20 at the time.
Well, somebody else to believe in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we need it. There's been a bit of a vacuum after Murray, hasn't there? And obviously, because don't forget, Murray picked up almost as soon as Tim Henman and Greg Grzeski were finishing. So we've always had someone to get behind in the last 25 years or so. And so we need somebody new.
Wimbledon coming on already. How lovely.
I mean, it's just 21.
Emma's saying that's old in tennis terms. It actually is. When you consider 1985, Boris Becker won Wimbledon at 17.
I know.
He was born 22nd of December 2001.
I know where I was that day. I was in a hotel in Glasgow. I'm serious.
And how old was Emma Raducanu when she won?
I believe she was. Yeah. She's. I mean, again, she's another one who's going to have to come back. And
she's so interesting because she was obviously ranked #1 at one point.
She was.
She's now ranked something like 854.
Yeah, look, she'll make up the ground again. There's no doubt. But I mean, I don't think it's good that she keeps changing her coach every few months. She says that's just what she does, but it's a sign you need continuity at some stage. And you know, she dispensed. It's not simple as to say that she just dispensed with the guy she won the US Open with in 2021. He couldn't commit to the travel, the 24-hour travel commitments that was an undertaking of doing that job. But she's gone through a lot of coaches since then. I don't think that's a good thing. I think you earn success by having stability in your sporting life.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. I'll bear that in mind. I try to kick off my sporting career.
Not just your sporting life, but just in your life in general.
Oh, well, I've got continuity there, so that's all right.
Good.
Anyway, Aidan, that's great. Thank you very much.
With
Rexinold, yes. Rexinold. I was left with no duvet last night because of Rexinold.
I told you that would happen.
You said not getting on the bed.
Not get on the bed. But frankly, he's bigger than you probably now, isn't he?
Yeah. He's a lovely dog. I've seen
wrapped
pictures.
up in the duvet. I'm lying there with the
pyjamas on.
Bottom hanging out.
Oh. We don't want to know this.
It's an image for you. You may want to know.
OK.
Perfectly nice.
OK, well, it's headline makers next.
Does that put you off?
Well, no, I'm just trying to get the image out of my mind, that's all.
Sorry.
You're watching Breakfast here on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
OK, this is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. Good morning at 8:46. We're going through the headlines now with author Emma Wolfe and journalist Ella Whelan. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Can we have a look, Ella, at Michael Gove? Because this has reared its ugly head a few times. Not Michael Gove. But he was attacked yesterday.
Yes, walking through Victoria Station, obviously at a time when London was full of lots of protesters, and was sort of manhandled by some pro-Palestine protesters. Police had to intervene. He's said, and some of his aides have said, that they really saved his bacon, the police, that it got quite hairy at some point.
I just wonder why he was doing that. If you're a minister, and particularly a minister with a very recognisable face, why would you, on a particularly difficult day in London, just sort of think, oh, I can walk, do my usual thing, walk to Victoria and catch
in the very heart of the, Pimlico, Westminster, Victoria really was the epicentre of a lot of the marches. And he is recognisable, as you say. It does seem an odd decision, security-wise,
Very strange.
It does, but there's no excuse.
No,
You
there's no
can't go
excuse.
harassing people like that.
No excuse. And obviously the Mail has picked up on the fact that there has been discussion about safety for politicians, in the extreme cases related to David Amos. But there has also been instances of politicians being sort of jostled and treated unfairly by people around Westminster. But I suppose the offshoot discussion from this is that while there's no excuse for manhandling a politician or anyone really for that kind of behaviour, there is this sort of question of why has this happened, and whether or not the Mail links to the fact that there has allegedly been poppy sellers who were intimidated and that kind of thing. And the question is that something that was always going to happen, or was there sort of a bit of a panic built up around people's safety and then it sort of played out in real time? Footage of people in, I think it was Liverpool Street Station, selling poppies, being surrounded by protesters. And whether or not it was, I don't want to say a storm in a teacup, but things build a momentum when politicians in particular, I'm linking obviously to Suella Braverman, but others, hype up the fear factor, and then it almost makes it a reality when it wouldn't necessarily have had to happen.
There's an element of that needs to be looked into.
I mean, the front page of the Sunday People, picture of Suella Braverman, and they're saying, look what you've done.
And this, and my choice was the front page of the Mirror, which I think is really, and it's quite similar to that, but it's very irresponsible. Sack her now. This idea that Suella Braverman, whatever you think of her, whatever you think of what she said in her very controversial article in the Times on Thursday or Friday, you can't pretend that she's responsible for this. We have to remember that the far-right thugs, that any counter-protesters, anyone on the march who committed violence, who caused unrest, was responsible for what they did. To me, this is straying into the territory where you blame a rapist because a woman is wearing a short skirt or is drunk. They are responsible for what they did. Suella Braverman may have gone rogue. She may have said things that she shouldn't have said as Home Secretary. People can have their opinions on that. But you can't blame her for inciting a right-wing mob. That's not what she was doing.
I don't know. Is that... What do you think?
I have sympathy with that position. I also think that if you are the Home Secretary and you decide to, before a big policing operation, write an article which is, meant to...
so many people were thinking.
Sure, saying what so many people are thinking. But, in your role, I think that you can't expect there to be no blowback if that's your role. If your role as Home Secretary, if you're just me or you saying what we like, it doesn't have the same effect as what Suella says. But I think that Emma makes the key point about agency, and obviously people have exercising their own agency. The interesting thing is... Obviously, I don't think anyone is under any illusion that Suella Braverman is doing anything other than trying to get to the position of the top job. I mean, she is really
that's
muscling...
what it's about?
Yeah, she's muscling in like hell at the moment. I mean, she's... actually, in The Observer, it's got quotes from some unnamed Tory MPs talking about the fact that she's trying to get fired. That's the line that some believe.
And then become a sort of...
And become the sort of
right-wing hero.
But the interesting thing, actually, the latter half of Suella's article was slightly mad, but the beginning half about the fact that they're questioning whether the police events differently, crack down on football fans, very, very light touch with Just Stop Oil, crack down on lockdown protesters, very light touch with Black Lives Matter, those queries are something that a lot of people are asking.
Yeah.
But it's whether or not to then go on. You then the sort of consequences. You did have people chanting yesterday, "Shame on you! You've let your country down" at police officers.
Yes, I know. That was terrible.
Yeah. Let's change tack, should we? Emma, what are you getting for the 12th day of Christmas?
I don't know, but there's going to be festive chaos. Once again, and I feel like we do this every single year, once again, the railways. But this is the worst ever, apparently. This is going to be one of the worst Christmas works schedules on the railways ever. 5 main lines are going to be closed, and there's a horror list. They're literally calling it a horror list of projects. This is really difficult. Obviously, you have to do work on the railways. You have to maintain the railways at a time when it's maybe less busy, fewer people going to work, although not many people go to work in offices these days, so I'm not sure that... Anyway, but we also know that at Christmas, people are going out shopping. They're trying to get home. Travellers, 15 million travellers are going to be trying to get home. And between Christmas and New Year, there is this horror list with huge amounts of engineering works affecting travellers on the main lines.
And they want to get us back on the train.
And they want to get us back on the trains. And people are going to be, sat on coal platforms on that sort of getaway on Christmas Eve, the Boxing Day thing, when you're trying to get back, all of that. So here we go again.
Maybe we should all head to Italy.
Oh, I wouldn't want to at the moment.
Yeah, with some protective armour.
Yeah, there's a lion on the loose.
I mean, you do know that zoo escapes are more common than you'd think. I was actually looking it up, and it's not such an unusual event, but a lion was filmed prowling the streets of Ladisopoli, I hope I'm saying that right, which is near Rome, out at night, and, the local authorities told them to stay.
Wow, so you look out your window and there's
like
a lion walking down the high street.
Get out.
It's absolutely terrifying. I don't know why.
Wow.
Maybe some animal rights person who's watching can tell me why it wasn't immediately tranquilised and brought to safety.
Is he still on the loose, do we know?
No, he was eventually captured. It was Saturday evening. Everything is fine. The lion's fine. No one got hurt. But I was looking up escaped animals, and while that is pretty terrifying, this is one of my favourite stories. In 2016, a big gorilla in London Zoo broke out. He didn't break out into public, but he broke out into the keeper's enclosure, and the havoc that he wrecked on everything amounted to he drank 5 litres of undiluted blackcurrant squash. That's what he wanted to do. And then was eventually ushered back into his enclosure.
Now he's a type 2 diabetic.
Bit on sugar.
Lovely. Emma, Ella, thank you very much indeed. Going to check on your weather.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a frosty and foggy start for some of us, but it is going to be turning increasingly wet and windy thanks to this area of low pressure out in the Atlantic and its associated with fronts that are pushing their way in from the southwest, already bringing some heavy areas of rain spreading into parts of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Some of the fog across northeast England into Scotland could linger into the first part of this afternoon, but once it does clear, we will see some sunny spells developing here. Temperatures generally in the realms of 7 to 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling quite cold where the fog does linger and underneath the most persistent cloud and rain. For this evening, we'll watch this band of rain push its way northwards, eventually reaching areas of Scotland, but we've got another area of rain pushing in from the southwest. This again turning things very wet across England and Wales into Northern Ireland later on, and with some very strong winds pushing in across this as well. In amongst all the cloud and rain, it's going to be a milder night for most of us, but still across parts of Scotland getting down into mid or low single figures. The detail of this rain for Monday is still a bit uncertain, so it is worth staying up to date with the forecast, but it will be quite a widely unsettled morning with that area of heavy rain moving in. Some sunshine and showers feeding in for areas of England and Wales later on in the afternoon, but a swathe of gales pushing through here, so still very unsettled. Showers and quite breezy for northern areas of Scotland as well. Temperatures on the chart between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. We hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part of the week as well, with more sunshine and showers. Bye-bye.
I want to see that picture of the lion again. That's a challenge to our director.
I just can't imagine. What do you do if you were walking along that road and you saw a lion coming towards you? What do you do? Do you run? Because
no, stand still. I think
you'd have the guts to stand still and stare at it.
Running would be
no,
too
running
appealing.
would excite it. I would have thought.
But it's just, I mean, look, scary. You don't want to see him in towns, but I just think that is so beautiful. Look at that as a beast, king of the jungle, and all that sort of thing.
At least if you were in one of those cars, you'd just lock the doors, wouldn't you, and just hope. But
I would have loved to have been in one of those cars with the windows up.
Yes.
But just such a beautiful creature. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, amazing.
We've got all your top stories heading away in just a moment.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock, Sunday the 12th of November, and these are the stories we've been covering on Breakfast so far today.
Again on Remembrance Sunday follows that familiar solemn scene in Whitehall as around the cenotaph centres the time-honoured, unchanging ceremonial.
Lest we forget, it is Remembrance Sunday, and the King, the Prime Minister and dignitaries from around the country and the Commonwealth will lay wreaths at the cenotaph in London, where a major policing operation still remains in place after those arrests and disturbances yesterday.
Well, our reporters are live across the country as we bring you events up and down our land.
But as we think of wars of the past, wars today rage on. The conflict in the Middle East dominates our domestic politics, while the spotlight moves from the war in Ukraine. We've had some fascinating conversations this morning with a former KGB spy. And if you want to catch that, you can do so on your social media channels.
The race to the White House is heating up. Donald Trump telling a rally overnight that if elected again, he would expel those horrible, horrible warmongers from government. We've had expert analysis from the United States. You'll find it on X, Twitter to you and me. That's at GB News.
And still to come on Breakfast this morning, the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, will be joining us. And we'll be putting some tough questions to him and finding out how he felt yesterday he was laying a wreath at the cenotaph, what his thoughts were on.
Coming up as well, we'll have a look at your weather with Jonathan.
There are some lovely frosty and foggy scenes around this morning, but those will be quickly replaced by wetter and windier conditions. Join me for the full weather details later on.
Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Mentioned driving at night earlier on. You said you don't like it.
I hate
driving. Is it an age thing
Yes,
with your
I think
eyes?
it is. Yeah.
Because I
don't know whether it's your eyes. It's about being nervous, not being able to. I don't know what it is, but it is an age thing.
Because I know my dad, who's used to sort of love driving, doesn't like driving at night anymore, and I'm liking it less and less, which is slightly worrying.
What is it? And I don't think it's necessarily to do with your eyes. I don't know. You just feel less sure of your environment somehow as you get older.
Don't know. Any experience of that? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com. It's one of those things. I'm reaching that point where I'm not a young man anymore. That may come as a shock to you. Maybe not. Do you know what I mean, though?
I'll tell you what makes you feel old is when I was looking to drive a car in France next year.
Oh, yes.
And I booked my air tickets, and, it said, do you want a car? And I will want a hire car. And it said, if you're 70, we won't cover you. I couldn't believe it, because next year I am.
Heck.
I know. And I thought, I've never felt that before. And suddenly you're sort of slapped down from normal life.
Why won't they cover you at 70?
Well, I think certain ones will, but this particular website that I was using to book the airline tickets wouldn't if you're 70.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it just makes you wonder then if I do have to hire a car through another company, whether the premiums will go right up.
Yeah, maybe.
Can't lie about your age on something like that either, because what if something happened? You wouldn't be covered.
No. So, I feel better about being 50 next year.
Oh.
Every year is a blessing.
You're a
I'll tell you that. And
that's true.
It's highlighted on weekends like this and on Remembrance Sunday because when we talk about those who've been lost in war, and particularly in the Great Wars, of course, it's predominantly young men and often teenagers or early 20s, which is frankly
They were so
terrifying.
young. They were so young. There's a man in today's Daily Express called John. He's an Air Force hero. In fact, he was given the Distinguished Flying Cross twice. And he was He was on some big bombing campaign. I think he was in one of those enormous aeroplanes, the Wellington bomber, that's right. He's 102, and he is still clearly very switched on, talking to the Daily Express about the people he remembers who didn't return.
I'll tell you what's... Is that a picture of him when he was during the war?
Young man again, you know.
I think it's important sometimes when we see older people...
I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there he is.
To see them as their younger selves as well, because we all sort of... We forget that we've all been young and handsome once.
Exactly, yes. Exactly.
There you go, these young men.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember all of that, and it will be remembered today at the Cenotaph, where, of course, King Charles, the Prime Minister, and hundreds of dignitaries from across the UK and the Commonwealth will remember the war dead and those who continue to defend our freedoms.
Almost 10,000 veterans and 800 armed forces personnel from 3 services will take part in a march past. A 2-minute silence across the whole of the country will take place at 11 o'clock, of course. And then wreaths will be laid by members of the royal family, senior politicians and dignitaries at the Cenotaph in London. And, of course, that's going to be reflected at war memorials right throughout the land.
Yes, absolutely will. Let's cross to our reporters across England and Northern Ireland. Cameron Walker, Olivia Utley, Doogie Beattie and, of course, Jack Carson joining us as well this hour. So let's start with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. And this, I mean, looking at what's happening behind you at the moment, Cameron, seeing all this sort of preparation going on for what is a hugely important day.
It certainly is, and it's getting incredibly busy here on Horse Guards Parade. We're expecting just shy of 10,000 veterans taking part in the march past later on to mark Remembrance Sunday. And I'm joined by the Director of Remembrance at the Royal British Legion, Philippa Rawlinson. Philippa, thank you for joining us here on GB News. First of all, just explain to me how important remembrance events like this are.
Well, you can see the buzz and the community that are around us here on Horse Guards Parade, and we find this at the Royal British Legion every time we work with the Armed Forces community, past and present, to put on a remembrance event. It's really powerful for them. They want to know that their service on behalf of us, their sacrifice and that of their families is remembered, and that's certainly what we're doing today, bringing our community together to remember those comrades that can no longer march with them.
And for the first time, individual veterans can take part in this march past, can't they? Just explain to me about that.
Well, for many years, the RBL team have worked with regimental associations. We work with over 300 associations to mass almost 10,000 veterans to take part in the march past. But we know that the veteran community is changing, and some veterans choose not to join regimental associations for many different reasons. But they might have their own small, more informal groups, or they might choose to remember individually. So by opening up registration to individual veterans, we've been able to invite them, and I'm pleased to say that we have over 300 individual veterans with us today. Majority Army, but some RAF and some Navy, and they'll be formed up in the relevant columns. In fact, we have over 230 veterans from the Army who will be marching together, and that feels really powerful because we're all about opening up remembrance for all.
And of course, it's really interesting seeing people from all ages here at Horse Guards Parade, and particularly young people who perhaps do not remember the world wars and the subsequent wars since. How important is it to teach younger people about remembrance and the sacrifices service personnel make?
I think it's incredibly important. We think about passing the baton of remembrance on, and amongst the associations marching today is Scottish Little Soldiers. All those children have lost their parents in conflict, and that's very recent. And I think one of the things we have to remember is all these veterans around us. I think the oldest is a World War II veteran. We have a 100-year-old gentleman with the Spirit of Normandy marching, but many of them, as you can see, are much younger, not much older than us. And then we've got the children who are impacted by war and conflict as well. So we have to remember our veterans, our armed forces community, past and very much present.
And the relationship with the royal family is particularly poignant for these veterans too. I understand Princess Anne, Princess Royal will be taking the salutes for the veterans march past. Is that something which veterans here look forward to?
Absolutely. I mean, we know there's a very close relationship between the whole of the royal household and the armed forces community, and it means a lot to the veterans to have a senior member of the royal family here with them today taking their salute. Makes them incredibly proud.
And our GB News viewers, with the help of Patrick Christie's, has managed to raise well over £230 £34,000 for the Royal British Legion. How do you feel about that kind of money?
Incredibly humbled and thankful on behalf of us all to your viewers. You know, every poppy shows people care, but every donation as well enables us at the Royal British Legion to continue our work to care for our armed forces community year round, supporting them in the way that's right for them.
Philippa, thank you so much for speaking to us on GB News. Really appreciate it. Well, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery will be here just before 11 o'clock, and they will be firing their guns at the start of the 2-minute silence and at the end as well, of course, marking Remembrance Sunday.
Cameron, thanks very much indeed. It's fascinating watching all the different uniforms of people behind you.
Yes, isn't it, Joss?
Shall we cross now to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley? How do you think the politicians are going to be reflecting today?
Yeah, it's been a very, very difficult week for Rishi Sunak. Today, of course, is a day for unity, and I expect we'll see a dignified display from everyone involved. But that doesn't mean that Rishi Sunak's problems have gone away. This week, he's been beset by issues with the Home Secretary. Suella Braverman wrote an op-ed in The Times, which wasn't signed off by Number 10, in which she pretty blatantly criticised the Metropolitan Police. Now, there were arguments over whether or not she broke the ministerial code, and calls on Rishi Sunak to sack her. He didn't sack her, and just about, it seems, everyone kind of got away with it. Yesterday's march, there were certainly some very violent scenes. I was out on the streets all day. There were police officers being injured. A couple were sent to hospital by far-right counter-protesters, and there was hate speech, anti-Semitic placards, and pro-Palestinian protesters throwing fireworks in the face of police officers. So there were some pretty awful scenes on both sides. But at the 11 o'clock 2-minute silence at the Cenotaph, where it really, really mattered that we saw a dignified show of unity, everything was just about okay. The Metropolitan Police managed to keep those two marches away from each other, as Mark Rowley promised, and the whole thing passed off without incident. Now, will that mean that Suella Braverman can stay in her job? I suspect so, although there are still rumours circling of a reshuffle early this week. All of those things will be going through Rishi Sunak's mind today, but hopefully not while he's standing there at the Cenotaph.
OK, Olivia, thank you. Let's head to Northern Ireland then. Doogie Beattie is in Enniskillen for us this morning, where, it's going to be quite something in Enniskillen, isn't it, Doogie? Because it's not just remembering the war dead in that sense. I mean, such a place with such a history.
Indeed, Stephen, it was in 1987 that on Remembrance Sunday, or on Remembrance Day, that the IRA planted a bomb here, and those that were remembering were massacred. It is known as the Poppy Day Massacre. 12 lay dead and 63 injured. That still comes through this town to this very day. And Enniskillen has a massive military history. It's like so many other areas of the UK, especially the north of the UK. I mean, even King William was escorted by the Fighting Fist Northumberland regiments back in the 1600s when he arrived from Holland into Britain and then across into Ireland. So that's how far it goes back, the Enniskillen Fusiliers and so forth. But yes, today will be remembered, especially for those that died here in that horrific incident that happened in 1987. And as I said yesterday, when you look around during the remembrance in that couple of minutes silence, you can see those that have served and that have commanded, and we have to remember those that commanded as well and what they are actually sending young men out into. And earlier on in the week I caught up with Major Doogie Beattie. He is a politician in Northern Ireland, but he was also a major that commanded young men into battle, and this is what he had to say.
I've served around the world, but on operations I've done 2 tours of Iraq, 3 tours of Afghanistan, 2 tours of Bosnia, Kosovo, and numbers of deployments in sub-Saharan Africa as well. And when you're a commander, and I've spent most of my time as a commander, there's a real loneliness of command because you have to make really difficult decisions, and those difficult decisions could cost the lives of your men. And that makes it really hard to do, and it leaves you with various scars afterwards when you feel you've got it wrong or you could have done something better. I mean, no plan to have survived contact with the enemy, so we're always in a game of changing. But look, when you're in the military, you're working with people who you may be in charge of them, but they're still your peers, they're still your friends, they're still people who you know intimately because you've got to know their family and their friends and their backgrounds.
Well, that was the thoughts of Doug Beattie and his real worries and regrets sometimes about how he had to command and what it left in him. And today we will be remembering those that did give the ultimate sacrifice. And it must be said, it is to bring the wet gear here in Northern Ireland because it really is starting to get very, very bad.
OK, Dougie, thank you.
Yeah, and you did read that right. That was Dougie Beattie interviewing Doug Beattie. Amazing. Oh, wow. Let's cross now to Birmingham, and our Midlands reporter Jack Carson joins us from St Philip's Cathedral. What's going to be happening there?
Yeah, good morning to you both. Well, here on Colmore Row, obviously you can see with St Philip's Cathedral behind me, we're going to get the military parade, of course, as part of this Remembrance Sunday service. Here you can probably see the cenotaph that's been placed behind me, dignitaries, of course, invited guests, as well as of course the Lord Mayor and politicians from Birmingham City Council, and of course the likes of other councils around the area as well are going to pay their respects, and of course to those who gave the ultimate sacrifice today. We are expecting a military parade as well from members of the armed forces, including of course the Army, the Royal Navy, the Marine Corps, as well as the Royal Air Force as well. So it's going to be some spectacle later on when of course those parades lined up and marched past us to take the salute from the Lord Lieutenant. But Birmingham of course is rich within its military history. In World War I, more than 8,000 young men and boys went over into France and Belgium to fight within the trenches. Many of those of course didn't come home. A lot of course, those particularly fighting in the Somme in 1916. The first act of remembrance service here in Birmingham was held in 1917 in August on the anniversary of the Battle of the Somme, and since then Birmingham has remembered every year, of course, when in 1919 the first Great Silence happened, and of course every year on the second Sunday of November, Birmingham has stood still at 11 o'clock for 2 minutes and remembered. That's exactly, of course, what's going to happen again here today. In World War II, of course, Birmingham was part of the beating heart of England's industry, and of course was heavily bombarded by Nazi bombers as they tried to, of course, disrupt the industry and disrupt the production of course all that equipment and ammunition that this country was producing, of course, to fight, of course, for our freedom. So that is also remembered here today, as well as, of course, since World War II. We were talking about it when I was at the Arboretum yesterday, the Armed Forces Memorial there, which is such a poignant reminder of those who gave the ultimate sacrifice after the end of the Second World War. That is also what's going to be remembered here today, because, of course, a lot of people that live in this city, that live around the city, will know people, will have relatives and family members, of course, who died in more recent conflicts, for example, in Afghanistan, possibly in Iraq as well. So they will also have, I'm sure, as people stand here and group together, while it may feel like a community, and it will be very much a community here as people remember today, lots of people, I'm sure, in those 2 minutes will feel a very personal reflection.
OK, Jack, for now, thanks very much.
Looks as though it's very wet in Belfast and in the Midlands at the moment.
Yeah.
Let's hope the rain holds off, at least at around 11 o'clock. We'll be bringing you full coverage, obviously, of everything that happens today at around 11.
Yeah, but let's see how that weather is going to play out for you today, wherever you are. There's Jonathan.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a frosty and foggy start for some of us, but it is going to be turning increasingly wet and windy, thanks to this area of low pressure out in the Atlantic and its associated with fronts that are pushing their way in from the southwest, already bringing some heavy areas of rain, spreading into parts of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Some of the fog across northeast England into Scotland could linger into the first part of this afternoon, but once it does clear, we will see some sunny spells developing here. Temperatures generally in the realms of 7 to 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling quite cold where the fog does linger and underneath the most persistent cloud and rain. For this evening, we'll watch this band of rain push its way northwards, eventually reaching areas of Scotland, but we've got another area of rain pushing in from the southwest. This again turning things very wet across England and Wales into Northern Ireland later on, and with some very strong winds pushing in across this as well. And amongst all the cloud and rain, it's going to be a milder night for most of us, but still across parts of Scotland getting down into mid or low single figures. The detail of this rain for Monday is still a bit uncertain, so it is worth staying up to date with the forecast, but it will be quite a widely unsettled morning with that area of heavy rain moving in. Some sunshine and showers feeding in for areas of England and Wales later on in the afternoon, but a swathe of gales pushing through here, so still very unsettled. Showers and quite breezy for northern areas of Scotland as well. Temperatures on the chart between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. We hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part of the week as well, with more sunshine and showers. Bye-bye.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
(9:23). Good morning to you. What a week it has been in politics, and actually what a weekend it's been in politics. With that in mind, we thought we'd start the Camilla Tominey show just a tiny little bit early this morning, Camilla, because I mean, I mean, it has been actually quite a remarkable week for both the main parties.
Absolutely, and I think all the talk around Suella Braverman and her handling of the marches, and indeed we're going to reflect, of course, this weekend on how the Met Police has handled things yesterday, and with what the events are going to be coming up today at the Cenotaph, which we hope, of course, will be suitably reflective and not disrupted at all. It's going to be a Remembrance Sunday special for my show, really. We're going to be taking the audience through till 11:30, so we're going to capture, of course, the 2-minute silence, have expert analysis of the events across the morning. So it's an extended show. And we're going to kick that off, we hope, with Defence Secretary Grant Shapps, who I hope joins us now. He's joining us after his other interviews. And thank you very much, Mr. Shapps, for being here this morning, because I know it's an extremely busy and indeed significant weekend for you as Defence Secretary. Now, the Prime Minister said earlier in the week that he hoped that the police would be taking all steps to ensure that the remembrance services are safeguarded from any protests. Do you think the Met was successful in doing that yesterday, Mr. Shapps?
Morning. Well, I was here at the Cenotaph yesterday, laying a wreath for the Western Front, and so I heard the thugs really turn up and at some points try to disrupt things and certainly turn violent. That said, they didn't make it to the Cenotaph itself. The 2-minute silence went ahead, and of course up and down the country people will have been doing the same thing at their own war memorials, and that's what this weekend's really about. It's about remembering those who fought for our country, actually to give us the freedoms to be able to protest, but never to be able to protest by breaking the law. And I fully support the police in making arrests wherever those problems have come from, left or right.
I mean, we had problems from the EDL and some of the right-wing protesters. We also had problems, once again, with some of the pro-Palestinians. We had some extremely distressing banners that were carried showing Stars of David with swastikas in them. One banner showing Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman as coconuts. I think the Met Police is now investigating. In retrospect, should the pro-Palestinian march have been stopped?
Well, I always thought that actually this weekend of all weekends was not the time to have protests. It's about remembering those who fought for our country, the brave men and women who, within this department, we see their work all the time, but this is a moment for the country to celebrate their work as well. And I think it would have been preferable not to have had protests from any side. Having said that, we live in a free country. In fact, the irony, of course, being that without the bravery of people who've given of themselves for this country, the kind of freedoms to go out and protest wouldn't exist. So in the end, it was for individuals to decide what is unforgivable under any circumstances, whether it's extremists on either side, is breaking the law. And some of those banners were disgusting. Some of the chants are clearly anti-Semitic, designed to stir up hatred and support a terrorist prescribed organisation in Hamas. So whichever side this is on, it's right that arrests are made, and I look forward to more arrests being made, I think particularly from the march, where it's clear that the police were either distracted by having to go after the extremists around the Cenotaph, or they weren't able to step in immediately, but with the photographic evidence we'll be able to at a later stage. I think it's really important that we see those prosecutions and consequences for people breaking those laws.
There's been a lot of continued criticism of your colleague Suella Braverman. The Home Secretary, Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor, has said that she's exercised ill judgment and naked ambition. We had Keir Starmer writing today in the Sunday Telegraph, where he's accused Suella Braverman of whipping up division that demeans her office. Is she right? Did she make things worse this weekend?
Well, I fear, unfortunately, actually, what we're hearing this weekend are people trying to play politics with the serious points which are being made, which is it would, of course, one, be better for people not to have protested. And secondly, it's very important that we see action taken, because I know this from my own experience. I was in transport. We had Insulate Britain gluing themselves to roads, and we couldn't stop that until I insisted that we took injunctions against those who were doing it, and eventually sent people to prison, and it was them actually having to serve time that actually effectively stopped that course of action, and that organisation disappeared. But so I think there's a legitimate concern. The Home Secretary is perfectly within her rights to call for strict action to be taken, for the full force of the law to be used. I'm not really keen on the idea that in retrospect, whether it's the leader of the opposition or the Labour London mayor, that they then come in and try and politicise. This weekend of all weekends should not be about politics. It should be about the men and women who've given of themselves for this country. And that is what we should be talking about this weekend.
Although I think the criticism is that Suella Braverman's been the one playing politics as well, Mr. Shapps. Is this about her future leadership ambitions?
Look, I just, when you say blame politics, her job as Home Secretary is to make sure that, quite properly, that the powers exist and then the powers are then used within the operational independence of the police to make sure that marches and protests are properly policed, and where the laws have been broken, as they clearly have been, in some cases, that those prosecutions take place. That is what a Home Secretary is there for. Now, I wouldn't have quite put it in her language. It's not the language I would have used, but the point still stands. And I don't think, whether it's Keir Starmer or the London mayor coming in, I don't think their contributions particularly helpful.
Have you managed to speak to your colleague Michael Gove? We saw some quite disturbing scenes where the Levelling Up Secretary was basically targeted by a mob at Victoria Station, looked quite shaken up. Have you spoken to him, Mr. Shapps?
No, I haven't managed to speak to him. I understand he is okay. And it, clearly shook him up. And we have seen, I'm afraid, some pretty appalling behaviour. You talked about the banners, but the chants as well, saying, from the river to the sea, things like this, which are clearly anti-Semitic tropes. Now, Michael Gove has spoken against that kind of anti-Semitism, and he seems to be being targeted because he spoke against hate crimes. So it's pretty despicable to see that kind of behaviour.
Mr. Shapps, I know you're Jewish. I know that your constituency has got many Jewish voters in it. How are your community feeling at the moment? How does it feel to be Defence Secretary and a Jew and witness what's been going on the streets of London over the last 4 weeks?
Yes, I'd say I'm sort of British and I'm Jewish, as you say. And I think that one of the great things about Britain is that we are, broadly speaking, a very tolerant country. In fact, I'd say probably one of the most tolerant democracies, if not the most, in the world. And I would hate to see that brilliant part of our society lost, which is why a day like today, when we're remembering the war dead, remembering those who serve our country in the military, but actually also in the civilian services, I think is really, really important. I'm very, very proud to be British, and I'm proud to be Jewish. I think that this country is a great place to live. It's only around the margins you see some of these very extreme activities. And the way to deal with that is to clamp down on it and make examples of people who do wantingly break the law and support, for example, prescribed terrorist organisations like Hamas. And if you do that, then I think we'll get back to the things which make us so brilliant and so tolerant as a nation.
Would you like to see groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir, which have been some of the groups that have been leading some of the chants that have been so offensive to Jews? You mentioned From the River to the Sea. We've also seen Hizb ut-Tahrir be talking about jihad on the streets of London. Is it time for some of those groups to be banned, because they are banned in other European countries, Mr. Shapps?
Yeah, and I know that there's constantly a sort of review that takes place into all of these different organisations, and that's absolutely right to happen. I'm sure when the analysis of these marches and these protests have been carried out, there'll be more information to decide. So, look, I leave that to a very proper system that's in place to decide which organisations are banned and which are allowed. But, as I say, people going around and shouting jihad, I've seen this sort of idea that somehow it can be okay. I don't see how it can ever be okay, to be perfectly blunt. And I think that, we need to make sure that examples are made where people don't feel they can do that with impunity.
I mean, so you disagree then with the Met Police, because the Met Police response to the calls for jihad at a recent protest was to say, there are very many different meanings of jihad. What's your interpretation of the word jihad?
Yeah, I think that was entirely wrong. And there was clearly intimidating language deliberately designed to stir up hate, and hate crime itself is a crime. So I don't agree with that particular interpretation, but I just want to put on record my thanks to the police, who do an incredibly difficult job trying to arbitrate between all of these different groups and factions. And I'd say a lot of it takes us away from the main point of this weekend. I'm here in the Ministry of Defence, just across the road from the Cenotaph, where I'll be returning in a moment, because we're all here to remember the bravery of people who've provided the ability for us to have free speech. But free speech does not include celebrating the murder of men, women and children, or intimidating other sections of society. And that is where we draw the line quite properly, and it's why we want to see action that's firm and proper taken to prevent and to create examples that you can't do that on the streets of this country and get away with it.
Final question, Mr. Shapps, because I know you have to leave now and go to the Cenotaph. Do you think we're doing enough in our schools to educate children about Poppy Day? There was some research this morning in the Sunday papers to suggest that children don't necessarily understand the meaning of remembrance. Do we need to be doing more in the national curriculum? Perhaps not just on that, but also affairs in the Middle East. We've seen quite a lot of ignorance displayed by younger people on the streets of London in recent weeks.
I think there's always a good argument for doing more and more of these things. I'm quite reassured. I went to a school on Friday in my own constituency in Welwyn Garden City, and it was a primary school, and they were learning all about poppies. In fact, they were designing and drawing poppies when I entered the classroom. So actually, one of the good things I think that has happened over the last several years now is that Poppy Day has become, or Remembrance has become, I think, a notably bigger thing in our society, and it's quite right that it should be, and fantastic that people remember the sacrifice of people who've laid down their lives. Children should definitely learn about that as well. As I said, my own constituency, I was pleased to see they were just on Friday.
Mr. Shapps, thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is a very busy morning for you as Defence Secretary. Now, I'll be back with you in just a moment with a Remembrance Sunday special, but first, let's get the weather.
Hello there, very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a frosty and foggy start for some of us, but it is going to be turning increasingly wet and windy thanks to this area of low pressure out in the Atlantic and its associated fronts that are pushing their way in from the southwest, already bringing some heavy areas of rain, spreading into parts of England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Some of the fog across northeast England into Scotland could linger into the first part of this afternoon, but once it does clear, we will see some sunny spells developing here. Temperatures generally in the realms of 7 to 13 degrees Celsius, but feeling quite cold where the fog does linger and underneath the most persistent cloud and rain. For this evening, we'll watch this band of rain push its way northwards, eventually reaching areas of Scotland, but we've got another area of rain pushing in from the southwest. This again turning things very wet across England and Wales into Northern Ireland later on, and with some very strong winds pushing in across this as well. And amongst all the cloud and rain, it's going to be a milder night for most of us, but still across parts of Scotland getting down into mid or low single figures. The detail of this rain for Monday is still a bit uncertain, so it is worth staying up to date with the forecast, but it will be quite a widely unsettled morning with that area of heavy rain moving in. Some sunshine and showers feeding in for areas of England and Wales later on in the afternoon, but a swathe of gales pushing through here, so still very unsettled. Showers and quite breezy for northern areas of Scotland as well. Temperatures on the chart between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. We hold on to the unsettled theme into the middle part of the week as well, with more sunshine and showers. Bye-bye.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. We've got a special programme for you this morning to mark Remembrance Sunday. I'll be with you until 11:30. As well as a host of big political guests, I'll be speaking to veterans, our reporters across the UK, and of course we'll be bringing you the coverage of the ceremony at the Cenotaph a little later. I'm going to be speaking to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, the former leader of the Conservative Party, who's a veteran himself, having served in Northern Ireland. And of course I'll be asking him for his take on what happened in London yesterday and indeed the Suella Braverman saga, as well as his reaction to everything that's been going on this morning. We'll also get a view from the Labour Party. I'll be speaking to former Veterans Minister Ivor Kaplan, and I'll be joined by Liz McConaughey. She's got an astonishing story. She's an RAF veteran who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and she's basically the longest-serving female Chinook helicopter crewman in the RAF's history. But since leaving the military, she's struggled with PTSD, so we'll be hearing all about her journey. As, let's be honest, today is about the veterans. And former Defence Secretary Michael Portillo, my fellow GB News presenter, and Nicholas Owen will be with me in the studio as we bring you the live coverage of events at the Cenotaph. Now, Nicholas Owen joins me now to have a look through the papers. He is, of course, a former BBC News and ITN presenter. Nicholas, lovely to see you this morning. Thank you for taking the time. We're going to do the paper review a little differently and give a kind of Remembrance Weekend digest. In a way, the Sunday Express summed up what happened yesterday very well in its headline, dignity and dishonour. Give us a summary of what we've seen so far, Nick.
Yes, well-chosen words indeed. And I'll tell you something that struck me this morning with the spread of newspapers that we can see. It's one of those quite rare occasions when every paper had the same story on its front page.
Yes.
There wasn't any descent into the fripperies of news, if you like. Everybody agreed this was the major story of the day. The scenes, to be expected, I think, once we knew that we're going to have big demonstrations by those in favour of the Palestinian cause. I don't think anybody quite realised what was going to happen at the Cenotaph itself. I was driving back home last night. I'd been at an event and people had been hearing things and seeing things on their phones. They said, the Palestinians have stormed the Cenotaph. I thought, oh, my goodness. Look, I do hope that is not the case. And, of course, it turned out not to be the case. It's this other rabble of nutters, may I call them that, who came up with the most of the trouble. But not only them, let's be clear, there was also trouble by people who wish to draw attention to the Palestinian cause in the light of what's happening in Gaza, letting off fireworks. I think it was in Belgravia, another part of London, and several policemen were hit in the face. I have a policeman's son in the Metropolitan Police who's done his share of this sort of duty, not doing it now, I'm so pleased to say, and always awful when policemen get hurt. But in the big scale of things, you know, Camilla, when we look back, I'm old enough very much to remember the poll tax riots back in Margaret Thatcher's days. They were really serious disorder on the streets. What we saw yesterday, whatever you think of the Palestinian cause, and so on, and there's fringe people in that saying awful things. But basically, you had a peaceful demonstration by 300,000 people, which actually
And actually, the policing operation, as you say, to basically cordon off the Cenotaph seemed to work quite well. I appreciate that there was that incursion by some of the far-right groups. But at the same time, the Cenotaph itself remained sacrosanct, and there was a degree of dignity to the events around that in comparison to some of the mob marauding that we witnessed, and also, as you say, some of the anti-Semitism that formed a part of the Palestinian side. There's still a conversation, of course, about Suella Braverman, Nick. I mean, is that a distraction? Should we still be talking about the Home Secretary? I'd be intrigued, not least because you're the father of a Met policeman or former Met policeman. Do you think...
he's a Met policeman today.
Still a Met policeman. She was very critical of the Met, saying that they pick favourites, play favourites. Also, she has been accused by Labour politicians, including Keir Starmer this morning, of inflaming the tensions. What do you think?
To be honest, I didn't. I thought Suella Braverman, sometimes she comes out and she provokes and gets a sort of discussion going, which is important to do, about all sorts of difficult issues. I think she was wrong on this one. To be absolutely honest. I know so well, partly because what I've done for a living over the years, had lots of dealings with the police, mostly on the right side, and also talking to my son a great deal about all these sorts of things. It's always a very, very difficult thing for the police. For a Home Secretary to attack police plans in public, I don't think that was a very, very clever idea at all. I've seen Home Secretaries in front of police federation, police union, if you like, closest they come to it. I've seen them having a very tough time, being sort of booed and everything else. That's understood, because that's all about pay and conditions and so on. But when it comes to the operational side, leave it to the police. Mark Rowley, I know him well. I remember him when he was Chief Constable of Surrey, which is where I live, and I interviewed him when he was there. He's a most impressive commissioner. We've had a succession of commissioners. There've been controversy about them. Some weren't frankly very good at all. Cressida Dick had a difficult time for various other reasons.
Yes.
This is the best guy for the job at the moment.
Yes.
It looked to me as though there was in danger of undermining him. I mean, he's a tough fellow. He'll get through it, of course he will. But I don't think it was a clever
But there
thing.
will be always people who will argue, and I think Ian Darkin-Smith was on this side of the argument, and we're going to be speaking to him in just a moment, that actually the march just should not have gone ahead. And even if it wasn't for the Met Police to use the powers that have been given to them by the government to try and take action, one has to ask the organisers of the pro-Palestinian march why they decided to do this when they knew that it was going to inflame tensions. They could have marched on other days.
Well, I suppose they could. I'll be very honest with you, Camilla. Right? This discussion has gone on so much in all our homes and wherever you go, and people stop me on the streets to talk about
this.
My view is we live in a democracy, but the people who died, the people who served, my own father in the Second World War, my grandfather in the First World War. What was that all about? Their service and for those who died. It was about having a democracy where you do have opinions which very often you disagree with violently. Yes. As long as people do it in a peaceable way and don't break the law, that is fine with me. I know an awful lot of your viewers particularly won't agree with that, but to me, let's get on with it. Let's be thankful that we can do this in this country. You go to somewhere like, even somewhere just across the Channel, you go to France, demonstrations there are deliberately violent in a most appalling way, and police behaviour is very often terrible as well.
Well, the focus of this morning, and you're going to be joining me a bit later, Nick, you're going to be joining me and Michael Portillo, will be on the events this morning and indeed on the veterans. And with that in mind, Cameron Walker, who's GB News' royal correspondent, is in Whitehall. What's the atmosphere there like, Cameron?
Well, Camilla, I think there's certainly a sense of camaraderie, solidarity and remembrance here on Horse Guards Parade. Just shy of 10,000 veterans from across the country have travelled to Horse Guards Parade to mark Remembrance Sunday and, of course, take part in that Veterans March Past. Different organisations, including the Royal British Legion, but also Scotty's Little Soldiers, an organisation which supports children who has lost a parent who has died in conflict, because they are a member of the armed services. And Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, is expected to give the royal